Smoking and toasting, joking too. Sipping and roasting is what we do. Light 'em up, drink 'em down. Whiskey and cigars all around. Cheers, y'all.
Well. Welcome, my friends, to this fine radio program, podcast, and otherwise video cast. We're in pretty much every format at this point.
If you're not on this show, I'm a little stuck because I can't do the well like that. I've tried. It doesn't work.
You did it on the 100th show. I thought it
was
good.
different. Well, I intentionally had to make it something else because I can't do the well. My voice doesn't do that thing.
You almost went there right now. I'm telling you,
I feel like I'm petering out on it.
It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 111. But let me just say, I think most people who are regulars to the show know that you're a musician and you build and repair guitars, and you're a guitar player. You're also a very good vocalist too. So I don't see any reason why you would just have to treat the well as if it were a line from a song.
Well.
Now, see, I kind of like that. Maybe that should be your trademark.
Welcome. I'll work on it.
Well, welcome to Smoking and Toasting. We are so glad to have you on board for our 111th show. Yes, it's true. 111 episodes, and no one has stepped in. We will keep you posted. It's going to be a great show today. Adam Harris from Beam Suntory is joining us. I know he's brought Little Book, and I'm not sure what else. So we're really stoked and excited.
Oh, we were talking before the show. This is going to be cool.
Oh yeah, it's going to be great. So we'll be doing a lot of different I also understand you may have some things that are like unique and new and maybe not even on the market yet. So that makes me feel quite greedy and like I've got a leg up on other folks out there. So I apologize in advance, but I'm going to enjoy it.
I'm not going to let this cat out of the bag, but we're in for a special treat on this one.
Okay, well, good. So you may know something I don't know here.
I do.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty
excited. I know
excited.
at least two things.
We pre-gamed a little bit.
Yeah, good. Well, we're brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Avenue in Houston and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. Big ups to our boy Jeremiah and to all that they've got going on at B&B, because it's just a hell of a deal. I'm overdue, I think, for a B&B dinner, so we should put that on the calendar.
They're so good.
Go over there, order some bacon, get something else, order some more bacon.
Bacon.
Have you had the bacon there?
I have.
It's
I
unbelievable.
just saw Jeremiah the other day.
Oh my gosh!
One of the things I love about B&B, and you may not know this if you haven't gone in and actually looked through the whiskey list or sat at the bar, but the selection of spirits, whiskey in particular, but also rums and tequilas and some other things. I mean, these guys are really, you don't normally, I think, go to a steakhouse and see that kind of selection. And it's not just the number of bottles, although there's a lot, but it is very well curated. And that comes basically from somebody like Jeremiah, who kind of knows what he's doing.
One of the things I find interesting about their selection is they, of course, do have some of the usual suspects on there, but not all of what you'd expect at most bars. Mm-hmm. Because he basically goes, this is good enough or this is not good enough. He really curates the heck out of that and whiskey selection.
When we were at the Whiskey Sniff at B&B, you and I got invited to stay behind a little bit after, and Jeremiah invited us to a meeting of his bartenders. And they were sitting at a table, and he basically brought out some things for them to sample so that he could tell them about. Because one of the things that Jeremiah believes, and I really love this point of view, is that a big part of being a bartender is knowing and understanding the story behind the whiskey or behind the spirit, whatever that story is, because people like to know something about what they're drinking, especially somebody that's that's really into it. If you're trying something new, you just don't want to just know the name. You want to know why this is good. Why am I liking this?
Right.
What is it about this that's so he was telling the story, and it was great because one of the bottles that he brought out for them to sample was the single malt we had on the show about 4 or 5 episodes ago. I was like, oh, very nice. So Actually, it didn't make me feel like Jeremiah was on his game. It made me feel like I must have been on my game to have brought in something that was going to be on his list.
Well, it's fun to watch them too,
because
because the camaraderie when all the servers and people are there and they're trying these things and they're learning about this stuff. It's just amazing to watch the education go on, and everyone enjoys themselves so much too.
And I will say, if you're asking your bartender about the drink that you've ordered and they don't know anything, you may need to go to another bar. I'm just saying, they should know something, right? You know, even if they can be given a pass for not knowing about a thing. But if they don't know about, several things, you probably need to find another place to drink. Well, we found a place to drink today, and it's going to be right here in the studio. Adam Harris from Beam Suntory is here. He's got spirits all around. We're excited about this. And we're going to be trying, Ian, with this being October 25th, this will be our last Oktoberfest on the
last
show.
Oktoberfest.
Well, I don't know if it's the last, but the last sort of planned Oktoberfest for the show. We started in late July when they first started hitting the shelves, which is crazy, but that's when it happened. And we've done an Oktoberfest every week since then, and it's
some are great too.
It's been a good year. Yeah. It's been a good year. Today, for what may be our final one, we will be trying Dead Ringer, which is the Oktoberfest Marzen lager from Ballast Point, and we've had Ballast Point on the show before, and they are generally great with all kinds of different IPAs and with great sour things. So we'll see what happens when we go Oktoberfest with Ballast Point. That should be very interesting. Also on today's show, the Moody Tongue Peeled Grapefruit Pilsner.
I'm glad you brought that because I've seen it, but I haven't tried it.
I will tell you that I've tried it, and I can't wait to see how you react to it. And then finally, Founders has released Curmudgeon's Better Half. It's an old ale brewed with molasses and aged in maple syrup bourbon barrels. That may be the longest beer description. But Founders, I just don't know if I've ever tasted anything that I would say, yeah, they didn't quite do it with this.
They're one of my favorite companies.
They really.
I mean, if for nothing else, if for the Old Curmudgeon, for Dirty Bastard, for the Breakfast Stout. I mean, come on.
So this obviously this beer will be related to Old Curmudgeon, but it's Curmudgeon's Better Half. So I guess this is the wife's beer. And she apparently
likes a great picture.
She apparently likes molasses. Yeah, we'll show that to the camera when we get to that point in the show. So that is coming up. Some interesting stories. A group of Texas bar owners has launched Beer for Dogs. We'll tell you about that. Beer sales are actually off, and everybody's blaming pot. We'll tell you about that. And there's a new cigar advocacy website that any cigar lovers need to know about. It's been launched by the IPCPR, which is the Retail Association, and it's all about your rights as a cigar smoker, and it's a great place to go. So we'll tell you about that coming up as well. Plus, remember last week I told you about the Jack Daniel's Advent calendar.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
Well, guess what? There's another one out now, and it's for tequila. So I'm excited to be able to share that with you as well. So it's been a very interesting week. Want to thank Stuart and Caitlin Skloss from Pura Vida and Lukenbach Road for being our guests last week. And this is the point of the show, Ian, where I'd love to ask if you've smoked anything interesting this week.
The answer to that is yes.
I had a feeling. I just knowing you.
The answer is, right before I come up here recently, since my schedule's changed, I actually have about a 45-minute drive.
You have a little lull, yeah.
And that's nice because if I haven't been able to get in what I want to talk about, then I'll just bring it with me and I'll smoke it on my way here, which leads me to smell like a big cigar in here, which is okay with me.
Yeah, which doesn't bother anybody in here.
Nobody in here cares about that, right? So I lit up a black label from Blackwork Studio, Black Label Lawless on the way here. Yeah. This is a Nicaraguan filler, Nicaraguan binder, Ecuadorian Habano Rosado wrapper. So it's a brown, a dark, kind of chalky brown.
Yeah, you're right. It's that,
and it's got a little
deep brown
hint of red to it. That's interesting. I guess maybe the Rosado means something like that, or maybe that has nothing.
Rosado does mean red. Yes. So
there's my Spanish. I just learned.
Well, not
something.
Exactly red, but yes, reddish. Reddish.
It was a very firm cigar. Very firm, very beautifully. The labels are really nice, really classy looking, and a little bit they have kind of a tattoo art kind of look to them overall, which is really nice. And I've had this one in my humidor for a while, so it's probably picked up some of the cedar and seasoning from my humidor overall, but this was a gem. It's like, if you like coffee, you like this cigar.
Interesting.
There's some interesting other flavors on here.
It's not in any way a flavored cigar, right?
No, not at all.
You're talking about getting notes of coffee.
It just has so much of that notes of coffee in there and everything else. It has some other spices, like baking spices, like cinnamon, like and some other things like that. It's very earthy, and I got a lot of cedar. And again, I don't know. It's been in my humidor for actually months now. I don't know how much of the cedar was picked up or how much of that's inherent in the cigar, but man, what a delicious offering that was. It was the first third of this was a little bit baking spice and lots of coffee, mocha coffee flavor. Not really chocolatey at all, but mocha coffee. Usually you get those two together in a cigar when it happens. If you get coffee flavor, you usually have some chocolatey stuff.
Right.
This one really didn't have chocolatey going on. It just had that mocha.
You're right. Those two flavors are almost always present together.
If you say one, you're almost always going to say the other. This one had a lot of earthiness to it and everything. The pre-light on this smelled very earthy and a little bit coffee as well. And a little something I couldn't quite put my nose on, so to speak. But the draw on this was a hair tight, but not bad, actually. Let's see, after about a third of this cigar, the ash was as solid as could be. Actually, so since I was driving in my car, I actually had to tip the ash off so it wouldn't fall all over me and I'd look like that scene in The Big Lebowski.
Right.
Some of you know what I'm talking about there.
Big Lebowski reference, one for the show so far.
Right,
yes.
there we go. And then anyway, so I went into the second third of this cigar. The flavor kept developing. I got more of the cinnamon, spicy kind of things going on, almost like a hint of vanilla in the background. Lots of earth, still tons of mocha. The last third of this cigar ramped up the mocha to just a ridiculous proportion. I mean, it was like almost like espresso at that point, coffee flavors, and I really enjoyed it. I put this out, actually kind of went out almost on its own, right where I would have put it out myself, so that was okay. When I finally got rid of it, I would have smoked it further if it stayed lit. If I wasn't driving in my car, I would have relit it probably and had another 10 minutes on it, but I was fine with it right where we were. It was dead even all the way down, even with my sunroof open and everything like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely enjoyable. I believe this cigar is in the $9 to $10 range, if I'm correct. I didn't look that up, so don't hold me to that. But I will tell you this: if it's at the $9 to $10 range, it gets a solid 6 because it was fantastic. I would have paid $13 for this cigar, not thought twice about it. I would have given it a solid 5 at that. So if it costs less than that, it gets a plus 0.5 bump.
That's good to know. Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I love about the price to quality index is because when I hear you talk about a cigar and it gets something above a 5, I immediately go, gotta try that. If it's one that I haven't tried, because what you're telling me is you got more than you paid for on that bad boy. So so I love that. That's the
price to quality, Adam. Just so you know, we have what we call a price to quality index, where 1 to 10, 5 is you get exactly what you pay for. So what really matters?
5 is a great rating,
right? I mean, whether it's a $3 cigar or a $23 cigar, if you get a 5, you got exactly what you paid for. And if you get more than 5, that cigar is punching above its weight class, as a recent guest on our show would say. So a 6 is actually like when you buy this, you're getting something a little better than what you're paying for. You mentioned earlier, you talked about you like the Fuente Hemingway series.
I do.
I would give almost every one of those a solid 6 in their price point because they're great.
Yeah,
they're just that's a great
and they're not
cigar.
a cheap cigar, but you always feel like you got your money's worth and a little more.
Right, and they're not even that expensive overall. Like those little short stories are great when you only have a little time.
Yeah,
always enjoyable.
Well, I had an interesting one this week. It was the first time I had tried the Cornelius and Anthony Daddy Mac Robusto.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and immediately I thought of, and this will show my age a little bit, but immediately I thought of Jump by Crisscross, because one of the guys in Crisscross, and they were like, 12?
Yeah.
One was Mac Daddy, and the other was Daddy Mac.
Yep,
this
there's
cigar
that.
this cigar is Daddy Mac. This was one of the smokes that I had not ever tried before that was in my bag from the Stogie's Wingding. So I thought, I'll try this out. Give me something new and interesting to talk about on the show. New to me, at least. Brazilian wrapper, Ecuadorian binder, Nicaraguan fillers, a nice firm cigar, medium brown with just a tiny hint of that red that you were mentioning in your cigar review.
Yeah.
Not much, but just a little. It certainly had a rich look to the outer leaf, and that, of course, kind of makes your mouth water. You go, oh, this is going to be good. So the pre-light was a bit of wheat and hay with some earth, not unpleasant, but that was the sort of notes that I got. So I used a V-cut on it. I lit it up. Took a few minutes to develop, as some cigars do. You don't get a lot of flavor other than just sort of the smokiness right away. But got some cedar notes and sort of an oakiness pretty quickly into it. The oak aromas continued all the way through the cigar with a tiny bit of chocolate. It certainly wasn't a chocolate bomb, but I got a little of that in there. And some cedar notes and some spice, not pepper, but spice. And more cedar. Most outstanding thing I thought about this cigar was how well balanced the flavors were. It wasn't super complex, but it balanced like perfectly. You really kind of enjoyed just how they were all sort of meshing together without one of them sort of overpowering the other. So I like that. Made for a very pleasant smoking experience. It was medium-bodied, very enjoyable. Construction was pretty good and even burn all the way. It did crack a little in the last third, which drives me crazy, but if it's in the last third, you can almost forgive it. Could have, had to put it out a little before I wanted to, but it could have even been
it almost gives you
humidification.
An excuse to try a second one just to see if it's consistent or not.
I like the way you think. Yes, I like the way you think. Overall, I liked it, and I would smoke it again. However, it's a $9 to $10 Robusto. Now, that's a little pricey for me because then I start thinking about all the $8 cigars that I now have to compare it to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of cigars in the $8 price range that I love, that I'm a huge fan of. I think of the H. Upman by A.J. Fernandez and some of those that are like kind of go-tos for me in that price range. So then I start comparing it. Well, how does it compare to that? So at a $9 to $10 Robusto, that's also a little pricey for a Robusto, I think, unless it's a knockout. At $7, I would rave about this. At $9 to $10, price to quality, I'd say in between a 4 and a 5. I don't want to say I was disappointed by it, but if I'm back in the cigar shop, I'm looking at the boxes, I'm seeing that it's $10, and I'm thinking, do I want that for 10, or do I want this cigar over here for 8? I might be inclined to go with the $8 cigar. So that's just me. It was very enjoyable, and those are the kinds of cigars I love getting when you go to something like the Wingding or like a Big Smoke, and you get an assortment and you try things that you might not have bought off the shelf. It just might not have ever been. That's also a good something you chose.
Good call for being part of like the Cigar of the Month clubs and things like that. Because you get to try stuff you'd never pick up at the shop.
And I used to be in that, and then I lost my credit card that was on, and so I had to replace it. So the number was new, so it stopped sending. And I've never gone back and rejoined the Cigar of the Month Club. I need to do that because it's usually a fairly good deal. You usually get a decent amount of cigars for the price, and it's a great way to try new things.
Makes an easy Christmas.
Especially digging from whence you're rapping, my friend.
Planting seeds.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Adam Harris from Beam Suntory is here. Adam is a cigar fan as well. In fact, he just handed us right before the show started one of these La Paulina Mr. Sam's. So I'm very excited. I have not smoked this cigar.
I haven't either. I'm pretty excited about that.
I have a feeling you'll be hearing about this on a future show, without question.
Awesome.
So we'll talk to Adam about that. We'll talk to him about some amazing spirits. We'll do our first beer testing, and I got to tell you about this Advent calendar. It's all coming up. It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 111, and we will be right back. Sounds like it.
You're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing, by the way.
Yes.
We'll be talking to you in the next one.
Ian loves to tell people that after the first segment.
That's always fun.
Fun.
Hey, Adam, I don't think you're pulling the music down all the way either, because sometimes in the background I'm hearing little hits from that first song.
Okay.
I don't know if it matters. I'm just putting it on there for you.
This point is Michigan.
I didn't stop.
What's that?
Is it Michigan or is it California?
Oh, that's California.
I didn't
That's
stop
San
the song
Diego.
right
Yeah.
away. That's why it was still. I lowered it, but I didn't stop the
Gotcha.
song. But yeah, I'll make. Thank you for telling me.
Okay.
The headphones.
Is your volume good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, mine checked good, but or checked well. Listen to my English. Mine checked well, but when we started getting going, we started getting exciting. I was like, it's a little too loud for me. My sensitive musician ears.
There you go. And once the whiskey starts flowing, we'll probably
Then we'll all be
get a little
louder.
more robust. Yeah.
All right. Ready when you are. Welcome back to Smoking and Toasting. It's show number 111. We are brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. So on this show, we try to be as as balanced as we can. We're very much advocates of the craft beer industry and the spirits industry, particularly the sort of craftier side of the spirits industry. I'm constantly sharing with you stuff like, craft beer sales are becoming a larger and larger part of the marketplace, and so on and so on. So now I've come across an article that basically is all gloom and doom for beer.
Oh no!
But I'll go ahead and share it because let's balance this out. Beer sales across the country are declining, according to John Taffer, the host of Bar Rescue. And John says there's one primary culprit to blame, and that's marijuana. He says, and again, he offers no figures here. Okay, this is just his take. Beer sales are way down right now, he says. They're in the toilet. Craft beer is down. Premium beer is down. We blame a lot of it on cannabis. The one thing he has to say, because he goes on to say that craft beer has lost its luster, and the small boutique breweries have lost their luster, and the beer category is in big trouble. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think things have shifted. I think you're seeing a lot of, obviously you're seeing big beer sales continue to decline and have every year. And then what I call medium beer, which is the bigger craft beer companies.
Sam Adams and guys like that. Yeah.
Guys like that. Those guys are struggling a little bit because of the shift to how much beer is being sold and consumed by neighborhood craft breweries. And when I say neighborhood, a lot of these are places that don't even have product in stores, but they are destinations, and they make great craft beer. Now, I remember, like, when I lived in Boston, years ago, there was Boston Beer Works, and you could go in and order sandwiches and pizza, and they made their own beer, and some of it was pretty good. But this isn't that. This is places that are breweries first. That was kind of a restaurant that decided to brew some beer on the side. This was these days, if you go to some place like Brash or Eureka Heights, although Eureka Heights is starting to become available. They just
put
now.
their stuff on shelves.
But
awesome.
you go for the experience and you sit in their warehouse area or their outdoor area. Some of these have great outdoor areas. A lot of them are doing music, and they become destinations.
You mentioned Eureka Heights. They have beer and yoga.
Well, there you go. See, that's perfect.
That's funny to me.
And what goes together better? I got my center right here. I think that's shifting, and that's putting pressure on a lot of the Sam Adams and the Shiners and people that are the bigger craft beer companies, even if they're still fully independent and craft. And then, of course, you've got the fact that big beer has bought a lot of craft breweries, and so you're seeing. What's interesting is if you still define, let's say, Karbach or Goose Island, which are both owned by Anheuser-Busch, if you do still call those craft beer, and I know a lot of people don't because of the ownership, but let's just say better than mainstream beer. Let's use that as the descriptor, right? Well, you're seeing a lot more shelf space for that at your local grocery store because the Anheuser-Busch's and the big distributors are using their muscle at retail to get more and more of that product on the shelf. So 5 years ago, if you went to Kroger, your beer choices were far more limited than they are today. You can go to a grocery store now and buy some really interesting craft beer that you've never tried, maybe only heard about, and there it is. And that's just not something that was an experience you could have before.
So I don't. It just popped into my head. I mean, I was actually paying attention to what you said, but also at the same time, I went on a little daydream there, and saw myself walking into a macro brew, i.e. Budweiser or Miller, and ordering a flight.
A flight of Budweiser?
That's just funny, isn't it? Like, can you imagine?
I'll get you on a flight right out of St. Louis.
What are they going to put? What would they put on a flight?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Here, from left to right, you have your Bud Light. He
does say something I do find really interesting, though, in this article, when he talks about how cannabis is impacting beer sales. With 29 states now have legalized medicinal usage for marijuana, and 8 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized it just for pure recreation. You don't have to have a prescription for it. He says primarily users of cannabis stay home. And if you think about the fact that beer has really almost migrated to more of a social thing, you know what I mean? That people are going out to Eighth Wonder, and they're going out to St. Arnold, and they're sitting in the tap room and enjoying it with their friends and trying new things. Well, if you don't go out, you're not as likely to be doing that. Now, obviously, a lot of people drink beer at home, but the point I thought about pot was interesting. So I don't necessarily buy into everything the article says. I don't think it's as grim a picture as he's painting. But
what could the actual percentages be? I wonder. Because I'm sure there's a number out there. I'm sure it's a reasonably large number. But what are the percentages of people who are just going out and buying a bunch of weed and not drinking beer at all, I wonder?
That would be an interesting survey.
Or people that would have normally gone, I'm going to go to a bar and drink beer, but now I'm going to go home and hit my vape pipe most of the evening.
It's interesting. Certainly...
I guess that would also depend too on what video games are out to some degree,
and what's in the pantry. Right?
Who's got the snacks?
That's right. Adam Harris from Beam Suntory is with us. Adam, one of the things we do know definitively is that spirits, particularly what I like to call craft spirits or very distinctive distilled spirits, are up. And my understanding, actually, from some of the guys that I've talked to in the spirits business is that unlike craft beer, the sort of craftier side of spirits are not up at the expense of the more mainstream brands. The mainstream brands are chugging right along, but we've seen a rise in the craft side of things too. Is that kind of how you see it out there?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate description of the landscape. I think that our core brands, when you think about things like Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, the stalwarts of our portfolio, those are continuing to grow with no real sign of slowing as this whole bourbon renaissance keeps growing and the train keeps chugging down the track.
Well, and even on those big ones, you've added some new expressions to those.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Makers, we got a great program with our single barrel private select thing going on now. What we're doing with whiskey from the other distillery in Claremont at the Jim Beam Distillery with our small batch and things. We're really kind of pushing the envelope as far as putting out these limited releases, these cast strengths, these really unique blends that we'll get into a little bit later. But it's given us a lot of I think just the success of the business overall at this point in our history has given us a lot of inspiration and confidence to go off and try completely different things. And I think that our customers have trusted us for generations, but now with a newer customer, I think that we see a great bit of trust that's already been instilled just with our reputation, and now we see them looking to try our more premium things as well.
I think there's a general shift in the way people have thought about some of these brands anyway, because there was for a while where like my dad's generation, you find a brand that works and you stick with that brand because there's a bunch of other stuff out there that's subpar to it. But I think that with with today's, like, there's so many good things coming out, it makes a big difference too. And so someone who is a Maker's Mark drinker is willing to try, like, the single barrel or the 46 or some of the other expressions that you have, even though they're tried and true as this one. They're willing to branch out a little bit because they trust your brand, like what you're saying.
Yep. And I think that promiscuity is just kind of where we are right now. It's exactly to the point you were just saying, Cruz, where when you go to the grocery store now, there's just so much more different beer to choose from. And when you look at what the American whiskey section of, we're in Houston, so let's say a Specs. When that Specs back then, 20 years ago, what that looked like, there was probably like 5 to 10 bottles. And now you see what the American whiskey selection at a big store like that can be, and it's an entire wall. Yeah, exactly. It's an amazing time.
I want to ask you another question about that, but first of all, for those who are not necessarily familiar, explain to me exactly what Beam Suntory is and what your sort of, just give us a thumbnail of what you represent your brands.
Yeah, so Beam Suntory, we're a global spirits company. We make, we are, in my opinion, we're a whiskey company first. We make whiskey all over the world. We've got the first family of bourbon with the Beams. We've got the first family of Japanese whiskey with the Tories that make up our name of Beam Suntory. Making whiskey all over the world as well as cognac, rum, tequila, gin, everything inclusive, more or less. But what I do for our company is, as an American whiskey ambassador, I get to talk about the distilleries that we have in Kentucky, and that mostly includes the Jim Beam Distillery with all of our small batch bourbons there, and a little bit of Maker's Mark as well too, over there in Loretto.
That's great. So you were mentioning the Maker's drinker who's branching out and trying maybe the single barrel or trying one of the expressions. How much easier is it for you to market, let's say, a more upscale Maker's Mark than it is to put something brand new out? Is there comfort with that? Because obviously Maker's Mark's a great product.
Brand recognition, speaks pretty loudly. It gives us the opportunity. We do like to base a lot of our innovations on brands that have success. So whether that might be a Maker's Mark and what we've done with that over the last handful of years, or even with our Knob Creeks from the Jim Beam Distillery, when we're looking at
you've
doing
done a
something.
great job with that brand, by the way.
Yeah,
wow.
We've been doing the last 2 years with releasing and I think you got to try the 2018
I did.
Cast Strength Single Barrel Rye. That's just out of this world.
It was killing me. It was awesome. Yeah.
And we put that on the heels of last year's same kind of specs on the bourbon that we did for the 25th anniversary in Knob Creek. And we're just continuing to do really, really cool stuff. And I think, it's a little bit easier. I think that name recognition, that trust, again, as I mentioned, that's already established. And so being able to put something out there with those credentials and those specs and, those big, full-flavored whiskeys, bourbons and rye, I think that people kind of they're easy to go down the journey with us, as opposed to just putting out something completely new. Not that I don't think there's not an opportunity to do something completely new, and we do certainly have one of those in front of us now, but I like kind of building on the success of things that already have trust and success.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned using American whiskey as an example. Like, it used to be, one small section at a store like a Specs, and now it's an entire wall or maybe even both sides of an aisle. Obviously, for Specs, as a retailer, they may have to think about building larger stores, having more space, because the same things happen in wine, the same things happen in look at the beer section is so much bigger than it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
It takes more space to offer people the right amount of selection. And for you guys, it's like if you were just sitting there kind of cranking out your 5 or 6 sort of core brands, would it be less expensive to do that? In other words, is it more expensive now, or does the rise in consumption actually pay it all off?
I think it's kind of I think it still stays pretty balanced. Our investments are up. We want to make sure that we're putting out the right stuff in the right quantities for the people that want to have it.
Yeah, and you got to angle for shelf space and all of that stuff.
Of course,
too. Yeah.
I really like the word you used. Both you guys used it earlier. Curating. I think that our job is to produce as good a product as we can for, especially here with the the tier system as it is in Texas for the folks that need to collect to have everything available. They can have it collected, and then also when you go into the stores and the bars and the restaurants, give them the opportunity to curate their selections. I think that's a really important thing. So for us to continue to do the best that we can with all of our whiskey and all the products that we make at Beam Suntory, and then to give all those options to the folks that need to have everything under the sun that they possibly can, as they instill those second and third rows, as you were saying, and then give all those options to the world where they can go, and as a bar owner that I want to have my precious selection, I can have the most well curated selection of whiskey and agave or gin, whatever I want to do. I think that I think it's a commitment to kind of realizing your role in that chain a little bit,
I want to swing us back to beer for just a moment because I want to try this Oktoberfest, and then we'll get into sampling some of the things that you have brought with you. This looks like it will be our final Oktoberfest of the season, and I guess, Ian, that means we're going to have to start sampling Christmas beers now. Do you have
I'm sure it'll be out in the next week or so.
I'm sure they're already. They've probably been out since August.
I'm okay with it. I still have a little bit of my keg of St. Arnold Oktoberfest left at my house.
All right. So you did a keg of that?
Yeah, I just went ahead and bought a keg.
Nice. Now, I didn't get a big sound effect out of the Ballast Point. I did open it right on the microphone, but it was a fairly soft sound effect, so it'll be very interesting to see how this one holds up. We've had some great Marzen lager this year, I will tell you.
We've had very few misses. We've had a couple, but they're very few.
Yeah.
Most people are doing a pretty solid Oktoberfest out there.
We're big fans of the St. Arnold Oktoberfest, as we have mentioned numerous times on the show, and we found a worthy challenger to it this year, and that was the Bell's Oktoberfest, which was just fantastic. So you and I have both agreed in this, which is interesting because our beer tastes are actually a bit different, yours and mine. But on Oktoberfest, we seem to kind of be right down the same path, I think. You've already done a little research on Ballast Point's Dead Ringer. By the way, I'll show that to the camera. That's just great art. Ballast Point has awesome art.
Their art is always outstanding.
Awesome, really good, and I'm partial to the whole skeleton motif, so I like that.
Now, I will tell you, I don't buy as much Ballast Point as probably you do, because I just don't do as much IPA, and they do a lot of IPA, and they do a great job on the IPA.
I just want to mention their Sour Winch Blackberry Ale. Oh, it's one of the best sour ales I've ever had. So good. But please continue.
So this right here is interesting because this has a bitterness to it that I wouldn't expect. You don't smell it. It's not on a nose. It smells like a nice Marzen. It's got a good malty profile, and it has a bitterness snap to the end of it that I really kind of enjoy.
It's got more of that sort of baking spice on the tongue.
It also has
than some Oktoberfest too.
Definitely some of that to it as well. I like this. I think this is good. This is drinkable. It's different from the other ones we've tried.
Adam, I find that people who have good palates for whiskey are also pretty good at detecting flavors and stuff in beers. Any thoughts on this?
I'm on the Oktoberfest category. I'm always trying to be, I'm always looking to be surprised by it because it's not always my favorite style of beer, to be honest. But I do agree that this has a very kind of almost rich chocolatey malt nose in a way, And then when you get into it, I think that those the baking spices are probably what pops the most, and just a really.
I will say.
That's good. I think my mind is being persuaded about Oktoberfest.
When we say baking spices, by the way, that's a very sort of a floury. You think of baking like bread or cookies, sort of a floury, yeasty type of thing. It's not spice in the sort of
not
peppery sense, or in that sort of autumn spice, savory type of thing. The St. Arnold Oktoberfest has a bit of that autumn spice to it. It has none of that at all.
No.
It's all the sort of floury, yeasty sort of baking spice. But I do find it awfully refreshing.
This could almost have a little bit of cookie flavor to it.
I was going to say pastry. It's got a pastry thing kind of going now that it's finishing a little bit on my tongue there.
I love it. So,
but it's actually like it's a crispier snap on the back than I think most of the ones we've had. And what's interesting is it's still a good beer. It's not unbalanced or weird or anything like that.
And I will tell you that I think we have gone much stronger with Oktoberfest this year than we did last year. I'd say last year we maybe loved a third of them. I would say it's more like 2/3 or more this year that we've been really fans of, and I would put this one in that category, the Dead Ringer.
I'm for it
from Ballast Point. That's your best review ever, by the way. I'm for it.
I'm for it.
I'm for it. Adam, let's shift back to whiskey now and
Sure.
talk a little bit about what you might want us to taste in this segment.
Well, I thought we could have some fun. I'm going to ask you guys to read today. I brought a Little Book, which is our straight whiskey blend.
Yes.
I brought
Wait,
both
do I have
chapters.
to read before or after?
How
Little
about
Book?
just during? I think. Okay. Yeah, we'll do it during. So I did bring the chapter 1 and the chapter 2. I think a lot of folks have had the opportunity to try chapter 1, but one of the fun things we're able to do with our Little Book bourbon or Little Book whiskey is kind of show off what Freddie our 8th generation distiller, what he's doing. Fred's son, you met Fred. Kind of showing off what he does with his palate, as far as he's got a great palate. He's really gotten a bit of a reputation for his palate early in his career. And when he was challenged to come up with something of his own, he didn't want to just sort of follow in the family footsteps of doing, something higher proof or finding a single barrel series or anything like that. He wanted to take a little bit more advantage of some of the different whiskey streams that we have at the distillery and start to put together some of these straight whiskeys to blend something that was going to be completely unique and completely new. And this started last year with the Little Book, Chapter 1, which was called The Easy. And it's a homage to bourbon in a way. He didn't want to start off too esoteric. He wanted to start off with a proud anchor in his roots and his heritage, and so he wanted to create something that was very much on the nose with being a bourbon-esque blend. So what we got here is we've got the base whiskey that he used, which is a 4-year-old Jim Beam bourbon, and he tried different ages. He tried 8 years, 10 years, all these things, but he kept going back to that 4-year profile at cask strength at about 115.13 proof. And this is going to make up about 65% of the blend that is Little Book.
Interesting. So say that again. 65% of the blend that is Little Book is a 4-year-old?
A 4-year-old Jim Beam at cask strength. So when we make our Jim Beam bourbon, we distill it to be Jim Beam and then age it specifically to be Jim Beam.
Okay.
Our small batches we'll do differently. We make those to be small batch bourbons and then we age them in a different manner, kind of like stocking the fishing pond with the fish you want to fish for when you're going to fish for them. And so these are all just sort of whiskeys that have been done as experiments. Not the 4-year-old, of course. That's going to be a white label bottle. But when we're looking at the other components that go into building up the rest of the 35% of this particular blend, then that's when it gets into some of the more interesting sort of experiments and one-offs.
So what we're trying here is the same thing that goes into the white label proof down.
This is exactly. So that white label will be a bigger blend. These are actually hand-selected barrels that Freddie liked, and he wanted to use these to kind of put that base together for this. When we're talking about doing a larger release, some of those bigger blends, that's going to be about 1,000+ barrels that we're going to look into. So these are much more, dare I say, special barrels.
Hand-selected,
hand-selected for sure. Much more
sense.
deliberate path for these guys here.
Okay. And this is a fairly... it's delicious. It's a fairly straightforward.
It's predictable for Jim Beam, if you ask me, and not. So I do like the overproof of it, though. I like that, and it's definitely got a little more of the viscous or more oily kind of feel to it than you would generally expect from.
And that's going to be because of the non-chill filtration on that. So because of its proof. Cast strength quality, we don't have to chill filter it, and nothing that we do with Little Book, nothing that Freddie's putting together with those blends, whether they be now or in the future, those won't be chill filtered either. So that fatty acid content's still going to stick on your tongue, and that's going to give you more of that viscosity, that nice roundness
to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something I really generally like in whiskey is when it does that, because it's like you can feel that flavor just blossom in your mouth.
Yeah. I've been saying a lot recently, talking about chill filtration and fat content in whiskey. I've been saying it's a lot like when you make popcorn at home and you have a certain mind to being a little more healthy than when you go to the movie theater. And so popcorn at home versus when the movie theater just lathers on the butter for you, and it just sticks on your tongue and it tastes so good. Having that extra bit of flavors, I guess when you say non-chill filtered spirits, are like movie theater popcorn. Right?
There you go.
Makes sense.
I actually just tossed Sasheries on my popcorn.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah,
that works. Yeah.
The next thing we have is going to be what really sort of substantiates the rest of the blend. And so kind of wanting to create a bourbon, something with an homage to bourbon, as I said, he started off with that base of that 4-year-old, but then he started to find all the basic building blocks of bourbon, which are going to be corn, rye, and barley. And he went out and found straight whiskeys that we had aging in the warehouses, and he began to put a little composite of a bourbon mash bill on top of that 4-year-old. So what you have in your glass right now is going to be a straight corn whiskey.
This tastes very corn.
It's 100% corn whiskey.
A lot of body.
Yep.
and a lot of sweetness too.
Yep,
Yeah, very sweet.
And at cast strength, 133.69.
I'm glad you brought little cups. Let me ask you a question. You were talking about palate. You were talking about like how he's using his palate to figure out what exactly he wants to blend when he's trying to come up with this little book blend. Obviously, it's possible to improve your palate by tasting over time. Certainly my palate has improved since I've, started tasting things, whether it's food or whiskey or beer, whatever. But do you feel like for someone who's in a position like he is palate to some degree a gift? Is it like being able to, you can learn to play guitar, but Al Di Meola didn't learn how to do what he does. You know what I mean? Eddie Van Halen didn't just learn how to play. There's a gift involved there. Do you look at palate as the same thing? The guys that are in these master distiller, master blender places?
I would completely agree with you. I think that, as somebody that has a medium to decent palate, and I like to try everything I can. I try to smell and taste everything I possibly can, and I still acknowledge that I have a medium to decent palate. I think that when you're truly gifted, like anybody's truly gifted, it comes from somewhere that you can't train and you can't exercise. And I think that I would say that Freddie's definitely got a gifted palate.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, after speaking with some of our guests, guys like you, I feel like my palate is just barely learning to walk.
I totally agree.
Like you ever watch a
Totally
kid
agree.
just barely learning to walk and he's all off balance? That's what I feel like I'm at.
If you think about it, Ian, if you go back to the earliest shows, your description of what you smoked that week, because we've been doing that since we started Smoking and Toasting. I would say, hey, did you smoke, unless we're live somewhere and smoking on the show, say, hey, did you smoke anything interesting this week? Your descriptions of the cigars have gotten much more detailed. Now, I don't know whether that's because you have, gotten to a place of talking about it more freely, or I think your palate has maybe developed, or you're detecting more.
Part of it's probably a little both. I think after you experience enough things, you start to develop a taste for them. You start to understand what you're tasting, and then to be able to express that is another kind of skill, I think, that you create after a while.
Yeah, if you're smoking, your first or second cigar, and you read a review that talks about, a hint of lemon pepper zest, and you're like, what? That just means your palate's not, you're not used to that yet. And sometimes I have to tell you, some of the cigar reviews I read, I'm like, I'm sorry, but they're just making shit up. there is no
absolutely
way.
True.
I
how many words do I need to describe this? Okay, I'll do it.
I get you with the mocha and the cedar. Like, sure. And maybe these guys really do have that much more developed a palate than me. But seriously, you got like I've even seen reviews where they've named not just chocolate, but a particular brand name of chocolate. Like, seriously?
Yeah.
When I do tastings, I never tell people what to taste, just because when you start those leading the witness sort of thing, you don't want to influence what they're tasting, and if you taste marzipan and sweet potatoes in something and somebody else doesn't, you don't want to tell them that, because they think they're doing it wrong, and there's no way to do this wrong.
I work at trying to get my point across, because not everybody has the skills of Mattias Horseman, who it doesn't actually, I don't know if you've ever met this guy, but it doesn't matter what he's talking about. You're just enamored. You're like, what?
Yeah, you just keep talking.
It's so interesting.
You just keep talking. It's like Shirley Manson, the lead singer from Garbage. I don't care. You read the phone book. I don't care. Just keep talking. So you mentioned...
now, this one is very unique compared to the other two.
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned marzipan and sweet potatoes, and oddly enough, that's exactly what I'm getting on this third sample.
It's funny. I taste a lot of chocolate in this.
Yeah, actually, I do. What is this that we're tasting now?
Well, this is going to be that second. This is going to be, if you were looking at a bourbon mash bill, this would be your flavoring grain. This would be your rye whiskey. So this is a 6-year-old rye. This is 70% in the mash. 6-year-old rye that's coming out at 125.75 proof. And this is going to,
so we started with the base.
Of course, at this proof, maybe we're just scalding our tongues.
Yeah, well, it could be. We started with the base, then we went to the corn, and now the rye.
Yep. And so what would that leave for the third component there? Or for the fourth component, I suppose.
The marzipan and sweet potato, I believe.
There you go. We need the brulee torch.
Yeah, this will be...
This one has notes of marsupial sweat and.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I've read reviews.
I know. I've heard what you're
that were
talking
that
about.
ridiculous. It's like, come on, dude. You just write a blog. I mean, I have nothing against people who write blogs. But,
Well, that's why when Charlie was on from Half Wheel, I appreciate his blog so much because
because they're
very
realistic.
Real down to earth.
Yes, absolutely.
I like if you're going to try and get into a room with folks and you want everybody to speak the same language eventually. I think that the advice I give is to paint a very broad stroke. Use a very broad stroke and say sweet, spicy, oaky. Look at those words.
Whiskey good.
Whiskey good. Yes. And then
This one is the sweetness in everything.
So this is going to be the malt.
Right.
So this will be our malted barley. And this
So
is
no
6
wonder
years
you
old.
like this one, Ian, because you're a malt head. You totally.
I love
you
malt.
love malt. Yes.
It's 100% malt too.
Did you ever get like a real malt from a malt shop kind of
Yes.
thing?
Oh, it's
remember when
amazing.
you'd be into it and you get that little
little
ball of
clump?
malt that
Yes.
is dry in the middle?
You get that little dryness.
love that.
Yeah.
Do you remember when malted milk balls were actually malted milk balls?
Yes, that's when I loved them, and then they changed and got weird.
All
Yeah,
right.
Whopper. Is that what that is?
So,
Whopper, right?
so
Yeah.
somehow I get the impression that if I were to pour all four of these samples together, I would not get what you're about to show us here. As
I was just about to ask that if I can manipulate these small tasters just enough.
Well, I would
can
have to say
end
that
up
that's
with-
where the wonderful palate and the developing expertise come into play for
Right.
what Freddie's doing here.
because
so.
with a palate, when you're doing this, and I think it's the same for guys who are the master brewers for beer as well. You have to actually project what this combination of flavors is going to bring. It's not about what they bring when you first combine them, because there's going to be some aging involved, and it isn't always going to be, conditions aren't always. There are different conditions you can put them in, what kind of barrels you age them in, and so on. So
I'd say this is a much more direct. What he plays around with or what he puts together is pretty much what's going to hit the shelf in the bottle. Mm-hmm. So there's not a whole lot of at this point there's no sort of secondary conditioning or anything like that. It all goes from the liquid streams go into a blend, and then that's what he makes a decision, and then they move from there.
I have to say it's fascinating to do a deconstruction like this, because when I taste this final product, I can, I've educated my palate to a small degree where I can start picking out what parts of this I'm tasting out of these other tasters that you gave
That's
me.
that's the idea of doing something
Fascinating.
like this. Yeah.
And it's interesting how they blend, because I don't think that any one of these had a very cinnamony kind of flavor, but this has, when it blends together, has a little bit of cinnamon in it that I didn't detect individually in any one of those.
I was just about to say, this is another of those instances where the sum is greater than the total of its parts.
I agree. I mean, I think that everybody that tries that 13-year-old corn whiskey didn't realize how much they need 13-year-old corn whiskey in their life. But when you put all them together, I definitely think that the sum is greater.
Now, is this pre-aged, and what's the
So
proof
this
on
would be
this?
this is just a combination of the three, or a combination of the four. Excuse me. So we're looking at the youngest age of all four components is going to be 6 years old. So if we were going to label it, we had to put 6 years old on it, but we don't. It's a no age statement whiskey. And this is when it comes into the barrel, or when it comes in the bottle. Excuse me, it's going to come out at 120.88. So just under 121.
Wow! And is that how you'll bottle it and sell it?
That's how it was. Yeah. So that was just.
You're going to want to work on the label a little bit.
Yeah.
The
The lab samples
the
not
graphics could
as
use
sexy
some
as some of those
updating.
craft
Yeah.
beer cans that are coming out.
I'm going to
now,
put this up there because it's super neat to see it that
Yeah.
way too. Though that's incredibly cool.
Yeah, it really is.
It's
Y'all were
lights
speaking
get-
about craft beer art, and I know it's not
Yes.
necessarily craft, but something came. Planters did a
Yes.
beer. Did you see that can? That's like one of the cool.
it's
that's
it's
cool
a
can.
Mr. Peanut can. It's a limited release with a brewery, I believe, in Chicago, and it is
How cool is that?
peanut based. I think it's a stout, and but it's a Planters. No, I'm sorry, it's an IPA because it's called Mr. IPA Nut.
Yeah.
Is,
such a can,
is the
though.
name of
What
it.
a
But
can.
yeah. Oh, it's one of the greatest cans you've ever seen because it says, well, the Mr. Peanut.
Right,
thing.
right.
Well, basically, it's just like the monocle and then like his head from here to here, and that's the whole can.
Nice.
But it's actually very cool. So
I haven't seen.
I
This
haven't-
is fascinating. Thank you so
haven't
much.
tasted
for
You're
it.
this.
very
So-
welcome. That's just
Yeah.
chapter 1. We got chapter 2 to go.
I could tell you the last two components of chapter 1 I could just sit and enjoy by themselves all
Yeah.
day.
I could enjoy all of the components by themselves all day.
Well, I
but
was
yes,
picking two favorites out of it.
But I will tell you this again, as much as it was interesting to taste all of the components individually, this is certainly one of those things where what you get when you put them all together is so much more interesting and so much more complex, and really kind of leaves your palate kind of searching, kind of ticking through the different flavors, and that's what makes it so interesting.
I couldn't necessarily say. I don't think I could possibly do that the way that Freddie did it, and I've Freddie just turned 31 this past September, and so we got together to try this sometime last year, and he had just kind of more or less gotten the keys of the car when his dad handed over and said, "You'll be the distiller." And Fred's still our master distiller, but Freddie's a distiller in training as the 8th generation there. And when we tried this together, and he took us all through the tasting just like we sort of did, and I looked at him and had a bit of a quizzical look on my face, and he's like, "What?" I was like, "You sure you did this?" He goes, "Yeah, I did this," and he kind of holds that against me to this day. But.
I would be a terrible master distiller because I would be just all trial and error. Okay, let's try this, and this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try this, and this.
That's what you do, though. I mean,
that's called
not
mixed drinks at Cruz's house.
That's exactly what it is. And on that note, we'll take a quick break, and we'll be back to try some more. Is this next one going to be a deconstruction as well?
If you don't mind.
We would love that.
All right.
So we'll be back for that. And Moody Tongue has a new Pilsner called Peeled Grapefruit. We will try that next on Smokin' and Toastin'. Thank you for joining us for show number 111.
I was pouring you some, but it got a little lost in the passing around there, Adam. Sorry.
Adam, I have plenty of these if you want to try them.
Did y'all say my name? Sorry, I didn't.
We didn't pass that around for you, so.
I like your tenacity.
Don't mind doing the next one? Is that
you're
all right?
you're like, we're going to try 9 whiskeys. We're still trying the beers.
Yeah.
That's why we get along.
Yeah.
How far over did we go there, Adam?
It was about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I've listened to a few of the episodes, and I really like the way that you guys sort of break down the cigar reviews.
Thank you. You know,
as an amateur cigar
I think
smoker,
those are harder to do than the beverages because generally speaking, we're not sampling them while we're
correct.
We're not talking about them while we're sampling. And so I think that the cigar reviews, for me, I actually write down my sort of notes. Okay, I got this and this and this, and it was medium bodied and whatever. And sometimes I smoke it earlier in the week, and I have to really rack my brain to try to remember what my thoughts were if I didn't jot something down. So I try to
if I write something down, I do it with the cigar in hand. But like today, I didn't have the opportunity to write it down, but it was fresh enough on my brain.
Yeah.
So I will tell you though something that I want to do.
Is that your own special? Is that your guys' individual criteria? The way that you break it down, or is that y'all follow? Do you follow a format as far as?
No, not really.
No?
Just
I don't think we've ever even talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I the only thing we do regularly with cigars is the price to quality index.
Yeah,
we always.
And
try
I like
to
how y'all
assign
have such a specific variance and calibration of like what a dollar means.
Yeah,
it's really specific, and you don't have that in whiskey. You talk about $20 bottle, $30 bottle, $40 bottle,
right.
And there's a hell of a lot of variance in between those two.
Sure.
10-point increments, and to be able to nail it down to within a dollar is pretty neat.
If you buy a $40 bottle of whiskey, you're going to drink that across a span of time. If you buy a $20 cigar, you're going to smoke it once.
Yeah.
And so that needs to be worth the investment.
Yeah.
And I find, we talk about price quality on the show a lot, but I find that cigars that are inexpensive tend to do better than a 5 a lot more often than cigars that are really expensive. Because if I paid $18 for something and it's amazing, well, it better be. I paid $18,
and it can still be a 5 and be
it can
amazing.
Still be a 5
yeah.
and be amazing, right? But for me to say, yeah, I'd have been okay if this were $22. That's harder to say than this cigar cost $8, and if it had been 10, I would be totally fine with that.
Would you say that you guys have individually or collectively a sweet spot on price? Like, are you like 8 to 10? You'll always be good, or would you say 6?
8 to 10 is my sweet spot for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident with most cigars between say $8 and $12.
Yeah.
I think if you're paying that much for a cigar, the company needs to back that up, and most companies do.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like if they're going to ask 8 and not 3 or 4, They've got to have something there.
But when you get under 8, it's nice to have, like, we have our price point, we call them lawnmowers, basically, below $6 ish now, I guess. And those are blast when you find ones that are great. You know,
I don't even think about smoking cigars that are less than $6 or $6.
I'll tell you what, one of my favorite ones ever is Nica Libre.
Nica Libre.
You can buy a whole box of Nica Libres for $50. They're like candy bars. They're delicious.
And they're fantastic.
They're on the mild. They're kind of in the medium range, but they smoke just smooth and awesome. And you'll pay $3 a piece.
I found out why. Hello, Facebook Live. Big reveal, or at least it was to me, because I didn't know this. You know who did the blend for Nica Libre? AJ Fernandez.
There you have it.
No wonder.
You know what? I never even looked into it. How funny
no
is that?
wonder. I totally stumbled
I've been talking about them for years. They're fantastic.
I totally stumbled across that piece of information. I was like, oh, well, no wonder.
Yeah.
Like, that guy's just on fire.
And
PDR makes one called Obsidian that's like that, too. The Obsidian with the black label is like that. It's a $4 cigar a lot of times when you find it on sale, and it's just outstanding, you know?
Yeah. Do stores price with the same kind of respect that you guys are talking with right now?
In terms of, are their prices like what we're talking about? This
do they set their prices out pretty much on the same level of quality that you believe?
No, I mean, store prices are going to be based on where the retail is set for a particular cigar, and some are a little higher, some are a little lower, just depending on their situation. I mean, if you buy a cigar out of the humidor at a nice restaurant, it's going to be marked up, another 30-40%. If you buy it on mail order, you can probably buy it 10-20% cheaper. But it just depends. Like, there's some brands, like if you're going to buy like Drew Estate Underground, you're going to pay almost exactly the same price for it
across the board. Yeah.
So it just really depends. But I think that stuff is all fast.
No, I enjoy that part of the. I enjoyed the first segment of the show very much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we love talking about, and I think my sweet spot's definitely the 8 to 10. That's where it seems to be. That's where a lot of my favorite cigars reside, and maybe they're my favorites because I don't feel like I'm really.
Yeah, you're not overpaying for them.
If I'm smoking a $15 cigar, I can't go light another $15 cigar later in the day. But if I had an 8, I can light another 8.
That can pretty much easily turn into a 2 or 3 cigar day.
Sure, absolutely, and often it does. All right, back for segment number. Is this 3? All right, cool. We'll try to keep this one a little shorter.
Only 4 whiskeys to try this time.
Now we could save some of those for the other segments. That's right.
Sure, you just tell me when.
Okay, let's go. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. We are so glad to have you here for show number 111. It's Spirit Time, Whiskey Time, actually, with Beam Suntory. And I know we broke down Little Book. Now, is this next one Little Book as well?
Yes. So the first one we did in the last segment was Chapter 1, the Easy. And so this is Chapter 2, and this is the one that's just now kind of hitting, Texas, but as we speak to the world here, this is the first time that I've had a chance to do a deconstructed tasting outside of the distillery with Freddie.
Nice.
With anybody else. So you guys are getting the first crack at
fun times.
All the fun, interesting components that go into making Little Book Chapter 2. No small task.
Well, we are looking forward to that.
No easy task,
Chapter 2 is always, I think Chapter 2 is the hardest. It's like the band's sophomore album.
Yeah,
correct.
It's like the first movie sequel. Like, it's like, how do you recreate the goodness that was that first one that got you to the point where the sequel was ordered, right? So I think it's the hardest one. I was reading the other day that so many bands fizzle out on their second album, but out of the ones that actually make it past their second, the third kills yet another like big round of those. I just think it's hard to consistently continue to produce super high quality product, but it seems like in the whiskey world.
So the problem with that is, in bands, whiskey, whatever we're talking about, the problem with that is if you set up an expectation, your first album, your first whiskey, whatever, when you come out with your sophomore one, it's going to be compared to the first one, and there's a lot of people who go, well, if it's not like the first one, then I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, if you're an artist, you want to
grow and do something a little
something different. But if you go too radically off of that, then your original audience isn't even going to get it.
Yeah, the second MGMT albums didn't even sound like the same band. Like,
right. So you can go the AC/DC route,
and do the same album every time.
Thing every time and be consistent.
And people loved it, and it worked for them. But
and they rocked,
Yeah, but
some people don't survive that.
But they're not a big critical favorite necessarily. I mean, over time, the critics had to sort of begrudgingly acknowledge what they'd accomplished. But
just for absolute tenacity by the end of it. Jeez.
Or you can be Beck and do a completely different style of album every time you go into the studio. So there's
the kicker there is he does it well though.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right.
But Beck has a smaller audience than AC/DC too, so you're limiting your audience to a degree.
That's
and I'm not saying Beck is small potatoes or anything by any means because he's not. But AC/DC,
No, that's a good point. So I know what I want you to get me before Christmas, Ian.
All right.
It's the new 24 Days of Christmas Tequila Advent Calendar. We talked about the Jack Daniel's Advent Calendar last week. This one appeals to me even more. It is from Drinks by the Dam, and it offers 24 bottles of 30 milliliter fine and limited edition tequilas. I'm only going to give you a few of these. Don Julio Añejo, Casamigos Blanco. There is Luna Azul Añejo, Don Futano Añejo, Ocho Extra Añejo, Ocho Single Barrel Añejo, El Jimador Reposado, Don Julio 1942, Herradura Reposado. Again, I'm only giving you a few of these. And Gran Maracame Extra Añejo, which I have not had and really want to
so
try.
What's the price on this advent calendar? Do we know, or do we have a ballpark?
If I can find this, because I'm
curious, because that's a lot of pedigree.
It's $163.26.
That's not that bad
for 30 days
for 30 days of tequila. 24. No, well, 24. 24
days.
24
sorry,
bottles. 24 bottles of 30 milliliters apiece. But just think, here's what I love about this, because this is the ultimate flight.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is like the greatest flight ever, because it's got 24 different tequilas for you to try.
It's a hot air balloon around the world kind of flight, I think.
So this is better than a Budweiser flight where it's 24 cans of the same thing?
Most things are better than a Budweiser
and by the
flight.
way, if you don't like the Budweiser, then dilly dilly.
Yeah, right. We'll.
Sorry, I had to take it there.
We'll go there. We'll go there as much as much and as often as we can. So.
If I stay on that subject, he'll start getting.
Yeah, see, I start getting
course
heated.
correct.
Yeah, that's right. I still.
We can fire him up. There's a few target buttons.
Well, I'm sorry, but if you are going to try to get me to buy your craft-ish product, some of which is very good, by the way, then stop airing commercials making fun of the craft drinker. I'm sorry.
For your mainstream product.
For your mainstream product.
Talking out of two sides of your mouth.
Right,
yeah,
right.
absolutely.
It's one or the other, Budweiser. It's one or the other. That's all I'm saying. And I don't have any problem with them taking that position. It's actually probably a good idea for a way to sell Bud Light.
Well, the people that go around shouting dilly dilly all the time probably don't think that far through it.
The people who go around shouting dilly dilly all the time are not people that I want to drink with anyway. So that would probably...
You have now laid down the law.
You really have. You've maybe alienated some audience now.
They're no Nat Sherman, but I will... no, I'm sorry. I said that in jest now, so I know Chris Hart and our good friends that have been on the show and in defense of the Nat Sherman boys. I know I just probably yanked on their chains and I didn't mean to. Sorry, Alan. But anyway... this might be a good time to pop the top on a little grapefruit Pilsner. What do you think?
See what I did? I love doing that.
You got him revved up there.
He is the puppet master, I'm telling you. Ian,
I'm just the devil on the one shoulder.
I know. I've asked you to try the other shoulder, and you steadfastly refuse. So I don't know what that says about you, except that you may be one of my better friends in the whole world. All right, so this is Moody Tongue's Peeled Grapefruit Pilsner. Now, I will say that Moody Tongue, which is out of Chicago, these guys don't make it easy on themselves. They don't just go, here's our IPA, here's our blonde, here's our porter, here's our stout. They really kind of up the ante. And I'm going to say...
Moody Tongue, I think, is a little bit like Dogfish Head in that way, that they just go where they want to go.
Well, that's right. And they nothing they do is... shall we say, an ordinary beer? Everything's got a real sort of a twist to it.
I think I like the carbonation on that. That
I was
awesome.
just about to say.
Remember when we had the caramelized chocolate cherry
caramelized chocolate churro porter.
Something porter. It was chocolate porter.
That was one.
Whatever it is. Yeah, that was
one of the earlier beers we ever reviewed on the show, and I remember we both freaked out on it.
Oh yeah, I bought more.
This is as carbonated a beer as I've seen in a while. It's almost carbonated enough to compete with Ranger Creek, because their beers are all very, very carbonated. But I'm pouring this very carefully into these cups, and we're getting just tons of foam. Now, we talked about why that's important, but I'm just wondering if it might not have something to do with the grapefruit, if that might not be why.
I don't know.
Because the other Moody Tongue beers that I've tried are not nearly as carbonated as
Maybe
this.
it's carbed appropriate to what they thought the flavor profile needed. Because I'll tell you, like, carbonation can be too much for some beers, and it can be not enough for some beers.
You like how I did that?
That's good.
No, I think you're right, Ian. I do. I want to mention, by the way, while I'm waiting for this fizz to die down so we can sample this beer, I want to mention that I returned to, last week, speaking of Moody Tongue, I returned to a beer that we have tried on the show before, reviewed, and I remember really liked, and it's the Moody Tongue Applewood Ale.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say that, and I don't know how much we went into this in the in the review that we did of it on the show, but Moody Tongue has succeeded with that beer, with the Applewood Ale. They have succeeded in bringing together two amazing things that you didn't think would ever work well together in a beverage.
Yeah.
And that's beer and bacon. It does. You wouldn't want a bacon flavored beer, or at least I don't think you would. I love eating bacon and drinking beer, but the Applewood flavoring in that is as close as you can get to the marriage of beer and bacon.
I was a little late on that. When you said you love eating bacon and drinking beer, I was just going to say that's called breakfast.
All right, I think we've had the carbonation die down enough.
You had a nice little Solera system going with your
Yeah.
foam there. For a minute.
Don't try this at home, kids, or do.
I want to point out, if the camera didn't catch it, by the way, he poured a little over poured one glass, and it foamed over the glass, so he just held that foam over the other glass.
Yeah, and
to
it
catch
worked.
it.
It worked.
No spill, no problems.
No spill, no problems. So Moody Tongue's peeled grapefruit. I love the way they describe it.
It's got a funk to the smell that I kind of enjoy, but they kind of do that too, you know?
Well, I will admit I've had this before because I couldn't wait to get to the show to try one.
It's got bits of grapefruit.
Does it really?
Maybe.
Oh, I think it does.
Unfiltered. Yeah.
Look at the top
I
of
think
mine.
it does.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why it's peeled.
I mean, and you tell me I bring chunky beer.
Well, in this case, I love it. I think this is as refreshing a citrus beer
This is
as
outstanding.
I've had in a long, long time.
I usually see something this carbed, and I'm initially like, meh,
I'm with you. I agree. I don't usually like
too
the
bubbly.
heavily carbonated.
Zima is like that.
Right. I like a little carbonation, but
That's right. I mentioned Zima on
Yeah,
our
you
show.
did. You did.
That makes us legit. That gives us street cred.
And now you can't unmention it. I like this a lot. It's super refreshing, and I totally get the peeled grapefruit flavor. I mean, it really, but yet it's not a sour beer,
No.
which is interesting.
This is delicious. This is absolutely. The nose is so interesting. Like I said, there's a little
It's
bit of funk in
multi-fruited.
a
It's not
great
just
in a great
grapefruit.
way. It's got that grapefruit. It's got lots of citrus overall. Like, it leaves your mouth going, I want more of that.
Yeah.
In typical Moody Tongue fashion, they don't tell us a lot about this except that it's if I'm reading the bottle right, 4.6% ale, and that Pilsner, and that they are from Chicago. And that's about all they tell us.
I think that the peeled grapefruit really comes in when you get because you can definitely taste the pith a little bit. You know,
Right.
you taste
I know
the
what
white
you're
of
talking
the rind
about.
there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's interesting because this doesn't taste anything like. I think of the other beers that we've tried and that I really enjoyed that have a grapefruit vibe to them. The St. Arnold Art Car IPA is an
Right.
example, or Carbox Big and Bright has got a grape. But this doesn't taste anything like those beers. It's not even. It doesn't even feel like it's in the same family, and maybe that's because those are ales. And
this
the
has
Pilsner.
grapefruit in the same way that when you buy one of those LaCroix waters, it has that essence of the flavor
Right.
in there,
Right.
but it's not sweet and it's not
like,
you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know
This has
exactly what
that
you mean.
kind of essence of the grapefruit kind of flavor going with it.
Available in 4
And it
packs.
makes it not obnoxious. I really like that about it. It's a good beer.
There is
It's
the
great.
Moody tongue, by the way. That's quite,
You are directly
quite
affecting
interesting.
sales because I'm going to buy that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this before that smoking and toasting does directly impact sales, and so today will be a perfect. You'll pick up some of that on the way home, I bet.
Is that easy to
Absolutely.
find?
Yeah, a pretty easy at this
Yep.
point. I think it just kind of hit stores, at least in our.
I've seen it like in the last week or two,
Okay.
and I looked at it. And anytime I see Moody tongue, I'm always like, I probably should. And they're always, I don't know why I even balk at it because they're, it's a $10. A lot of times it's a 4-pack. Was that a 4 or 6?
Yeah, 4.
It's a $10 4-pack, which is a little pricey, but their beers are always that kind of good.
Yeah.
Like they're just good.
70% of the time that I drink a beer, I'm drinking it for refreshment, and so that
That kind of
the
fits the
wheelhouse
profile.
right there,
yeah, fits the profile. I get it. All right, I tell you what we're going to do. We are going to take a quick break and come back. In our next segment, we are going to be trying the Chapter 2, but it's going to be deconstructed, so we'll go step by step with it, just like we did with Chapter 1
There we go.
on the little book. So, and Chapter 2 is going to be out.
It is. It's
What's
just
the-
now coming out. It's called the No Simple Task, and it's a completely different animal than the Easy, which was that homage to bourbon using exclusively American whiskeys. This is when we're going to start seeing what one can do when they have the resources of a global spirit.
Oh,
conglomerate
I'm
behind
excited.
them.
I'm excited. All right, so that'll
Nice.
be coming up in our next segment. Plus, we still have a little Founders to taste, so we'll be looking forward to that coming up. You're listening to Smoking and Toasting.
That is really delicious.
That's an outstanding beer.
Yeah.
Left if anybody wants to breathe the
Good
phone.
drink.
So yeah, I've actually had 2 of those before today. The first one I poured into a glass and it just foamed like crazy. I thought maybe I shook it up, like I didn't know. Had to wait for it to die down. So the second one I decided I'll just drink it out of the bottle. And so I opened the bottle, and it didn't like overflow or anything. But you know how that
And you took a
take
sip?
first
Yep.
drink, and like your whole like head fills with with foam.
Yeah.
It was totally
So
like
definitely pour it in a glass.
Yeah, so definitely pour it in
It's
a
a glass beer.
Yeah, pour it in a
Makes you
glass-
think how
pour it
much-
in a glass and walk away for a few
Yeah.
minutes.
How
you know?
much? How much pressure is it under in the bottle? Like if you accidentally tap it against the desk,
Yeah.
Pull the pin and
Well,
run.
I
you look,
thought-
look like somebody set off a fire.
we haven't reviewed them on the show, but I got a couple of Ranger Creek beers when Mary and I were in San Antonio, and they're so carbonated that it almost interferes. Like they don't. I like the flavor of them, but the carbonation like almost bugs me to the point that I don't enjoy the beer. And I kind of like beers. with
That's the
some
way
carbonation
most
in it.
high carb beers are for
Yeah.
me. I generally like lower carb.
Yeah, but I'm.
But some beers need it. Like that's delicious. Like you said, put it in a glass, let it sit for a few. That'd be great. Because that carb seems to express itself pretty quick.
Chris Hart says I'm on his naughty list.
Uh-oh.
Love you, Chris.
I'm not getting comments on here for some reason.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Oh, Chris is blowing it up right now.
Chris is the man. All right.
What'd you say they got him riled up?
So the whole Nat Sherman thing was because their parent company, Altria,
Marlboro, right?
wrote a letter in support of the proposed regulations on tobacco, which are going to destroy a chunk of the craft cigar market, the boutique cigar market, and they also own Nat Sherman. Now, in fairness, the letter did go on to say that premium cigars should be treated differently, and maybe you can look at them like this. But my argument about the whole thing was, look, we need premium cigars exempted, which is what all the cigar advocacy groups are working to try to get passed. They're trying to get an exemption passed so that premium cigars will be pulled out of this legislation altogether. And Altria is basically saying, no, it's okay, but just we hope you will do it this way. Well, that always works with the government, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the government always goes back and goes,
Without-
you know what?
without fail.
We can
Yeah.
change this.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Easy enough.
So Chris and Alan are good friends. Chris does the the Whiskey Neat podcast, which is
Mr.
awesome.
Mr. Hart, yeah.
He's great, and we love him. But they took a less passionate approach, shall we say, than I took on the subject, and so we actually had them both on, and it was, I thought, a great show.
Maybe Altus should do an ad campaign that makes fun of people that smoke cigars.
Oh, there you go.
While trying to sell cigars.
Yeah. While they own Nat Sherman. So I basically said I wouldn't smoke Nat Sherman again.
Make dilly commercials.
Yeah.
While you have craft beer.
Yeah, I'm smoking a cigarette. Dilly. All right, here we go, kids. Segment 4. Now I don't know what this is. Oh, this was this was, okay.
What's that?
Do you know what the last thing I poured you is? Okay.
Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. We are so glad to have you on the show. I'm sitting. I don't know. Was I supposed to pass this to Adam, or was this I may be drinking Adam's?
Have you been drinking
whiskey.
all of Adam's too?
I think I may have. No wonder this is so good.
We've tried 9. You're going on 18.
So yes, welcome back.
Exponential type situation.
You are now rolling in the deep.
We are Smoking and Toasting. Thank you, Adele. We are Smoking Toasting number 1. Smoking and Toasting number 111. We are brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. Adam Harris is here from Beam Suntory, and Adam, your job specifically is to deal with Beam Suntory is specifically dealing with American whiskey.
American whiskey. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
And
You are the bourbon vivant, I see.
There you go. Yeah.
is American whiskey the fastest growing segment of the whiskey market? Do we know? It feels like it is, but I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, I think when you look at the scale, I think we are the biggest growing section of it. I think
Seems
Irish
like
had a moment.
There's more new stuff coming out.
Sure.
That's American whiskey.
And I think when you look at the smaller distilleries, micro distilleries, craft distilleries, whatever you want to call them, I think you see a lot of growth coming from that segment too.
Because obviously most whiskey needs to age before it is released to the market. I'm just wondering what things are going to look like 3 years from now.
Yeah.
How much stuff is out there right now in barrels somewhere that we have no idea.
Yeah, it could look pretty great.
Yeah. Well, I love that viewpoint because, a lot of guys in your position would go, oh, gosh, here we go with a bunch more like amateurs and new competitors and whatever. But I think you understand that the more that this thing grows as a whole, the more it benefits everybody.
I think
well,
so.
not only that, but it takes someone with a global company like yours and encourages you to stretch outside of what you've been doing, like we talked about earlier. Step
Absolutely.
outside of that. Okay, we only do this expression. Now you're going. Okay, now we have these, and you end up with Little Book, which is amazing.
When you've got companies like Monte Cristo and H. Upmann going, we need a cigar that's blended by someone like A.J. Fernandez, because that's not what our core blends are like. Their core blends are very, very good. But now they're recognizing that there's this other market out there and that it's active and they need to be a part of it. And so they get AJ to do that. And that's in the cigar business, I think, a little bit like what's happening in the whiskey business. When you've got makers releasing the kind of expressions that you're doing there, it's a good indication that the market has expanded and shifted and you're looking to take advantage of a very trusted brand name that makes a great, wonderful, solid product and go, hey, you want to take it to the next level? Here we go.
Hey, try this now.
Yeah.
No,
and I love that.
We've given ourselves permission to have a little more fun, I think.
How much bigger is Makers than Little Book? Obviously, it's a lot bigger, but what's the ratio?
If you look at the home of Little Book, which is coming out of Claremont, the Jim Beam Distillery, and then if you look at Maker's Mark, then you would say that the size of the volume that we can produce in Claremont is almost twice that we can produce in Loretto. But then when you look at, batch to batch and bottling to bottling, the Little Book is completely, it's one of our tiniest batches that we do. It's a very small release.
And then Jim Beam would be even larger than
correct.
Now, how easy is the Little Book going to be to find on the shelf? Like, can I go down to any liquor store and just find it, or is it going to be allotted to specific places? And what's the price point going to be?
It's gonna. I will say it's going to be around an $80 price point, I believe. I think that was the standard we set with the first release.
I think it's solid. I think that's a great bottle.
We don't want it to be, prohibitively expensive, but we also want it to get what it's worth. And I think we try to price per what it's worth. What is it? The PDQ.
Price to quality.
PDQ,
Yeah,
right?
PDQ,
That's what we try
right.
to do. We try to do
Yeah.
the PDQ.
Is there a sweet spot? Is there a place where you're most likely to be successful in terms of pricing, forgetting for a moment what it costs to make the whiskey?
Sure.
But is there a particular price point that, like, this is where the majority of the sales are going to come into? Not including, by the way, the really cheaper mainstream, bottom
Right.
shelf stuff.
Right.
But I'm talking about in more craft type of stuff. Is it $30? Is it $40? Is it $80?
I think depending on how you shop, I think you could probably find something that would scratch your itch 25 to 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you want to go something a little more special, you start climbing that
Exactly.
that ladder. I know whiskeys can certainly get, in general, a lot more expensive than the rums would do. For example, you can find a real, not the super ultra premium like they have them in the lock case rums, but you can find the equivalent to the rum world of maybe an $80-$90 bottle of whiskey for probably $40 or $50.
Until rum truly finally has its moment.
It finds its moment in the sun.
Yeah.
I think that's coming, by the way.
Yep.
I really do. But currently, whiskey is, of all the darker spirits, is certainly the one that's on the biggest explosion curve, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
All right, so let's break this down. What are we trying here?
So this is going to be Little Book Chapter 2, and this is called No Simple Task, N-O-E, Simple Task, after the family name there.
No, yeah,
and
makes sense.
this is a departure from what Freddie was trying to do with the first release of Little Book, which was really that homage to the bourbon, which was apparent after going through the components of the 4-year base with the corn whiskey on top and then the rye and the barley, malted barley whiskey from there. So what we're doing here is we're taking advantage of not just what we can do in the U.S. at our distillery in Claremont, but also our sister distilleries around the world, and this is where we start to get a little Canadian rye involved. So from our distillery in Walkerville, we have some really cool Canadian ryes coming in, and Freddie, again, with his palate, has decided to put together a collection of two out of the 3 whiskeys are going to be rye whiskey. So this first one that we're going to try is a 40-year-old Canadian whiskey, and this is actually 100% corn. So this
What do
is
you
not
mean by
be-
gonna?
Well, we're gonna. As I notice the volume in your glass, yeah. As we will continue to try this wonderful 100% corn 40-year-old whiskey. This comes to us in the blend. It goes in at 137.8, and it was actually distilled up to 95%. So it kind of exceeds that boundary that we can do in the U.S., which is only our max off the still here is 160 proof, whereas global you can go up to 190. So this is quite a bit.
You mean the Canadians can kick our ass with the proof?
But then they usually have to add some other stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Just making sure.
This is so malty and delicious, by the way.
I blame Canada,
And it's huge, but it's so malty and delicious.
Mhm.
I want to put this on breakfast cereal. This is so good.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got a little bit of that cereal kind of flavor to it too. I mean, this is really something.
For the record, you have a
oak
slightly
spice.
different. You have a slightly different idea of breakfast cereal than probably most people. Just
Well,
just
this
for
would
the record.
wash it down with a Founder's Breakfast Stout. It's made for that.
It's 100% corn. Cornflakes are crying out loud. Come on
Cornflakes,
now.
yeah.
No, you're right. And it sort of has a little cornflake vibe to it, actually, if you think about it.
But it
With
also-
a lot of chocolate.
Yeah.
The oak influence really kind of gives it a little bit of a little cedar, a little chocolate, kind of like dark chocolate, cocoa nibs, sort of how that dryness maybe.
I'm cuckoo for cocoa nibs.
There you go.
That's
Isn't
that neat?
delicious, though. It really is.
Fantastic.
You don't get a chance to try a 40-year-old Canadian corn whiskey every day. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be part of our. That's going to be part of the balance. That's going to be part of the whole.
So is that Canadian whiskey? That's not something that's commercially available.
No, sir,
right?
that is not. No, that is
All
not
right, so this
commercially
is
available.
This is just something that you have access to be able to use in your blend.
Exactly. Since it's close to Halloween, I figured we'd celebrate Christmas, and I'm doing Secret Santa, so we're doing Secret Samples.
I love it. Mm. If only Secret Santa at the office were this much fun.
This next one that we have here is also going to be from that same Canadian distillery in Walkerville. This is going to be a 78% rye whiskey that was aged for 13 years. And we barreled it at 116 proof, and it came out at 111, which is appropriate for the show 111 here, as we are.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Sure.
111.9 proof.
Ian, I don't know if I've ever tasted 2 whiskeys in the same sitting that were more different.
These are
than
night
these
and
two.
day.
Yeah. just couldn't be more different.
The amount of fruit that comes through on the nose.
I mean, this was
On
very
this,
fruity.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And like fruit, like pear, and
Yes,
like
pears and peaches.
pears and peaches, like right next to the skin, like that kind of.
Which again, not necessarily something I'm used to tasting in a whiskey.
Right.
Yeah.
I like when we do. I've been able to go up to Canada and try some of the older whiskeys there and some of the finer whiskeys that they got aging, and it's a lot of fruit in Canadian rye. Mm-hmm. American rye, to me, a lot more spice. Canadian rye, much more fruit. And so I think
American rye is bolder, and Canadian
American
rye
rye has a
more
very
subtle.
distinctive snap to it that you don't find in the Canadian.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think sip on that a little bit because that is just a really great candy.
But they have universal health care. So, no,
there's that.
I thought I always say we don't go political on the show. I just thought I'd throw that in there just to see how you reacted.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. So so you have now shown us two of the different things that are going into creating the newest
two of the
book.
three whiskeys that go into the little book. And I think that if you wanted to see a big difference between Canadian, what happens? Okay, so let's look at this. Mm-hmm. For those of you watching live, you can look at a
Canadian, right.
40 years in a barrel
Canadian.
in Canada. So they can use used cooperage. We cannot, by regulation, when we're talking about whiskey in America, rye and bourbon. So used cooperage, 40 years. The color in the color in the bottle there.
Okay. Yeah.
8 years. Unused cooperage in the U.S. with our much more dynamic climate.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep, that's all
right.
But
I think just being able to see that huge color difference is an amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say one is almost twice as dark as the other.
Yeah, absolutely right on the head, twice as dark. But a huge contrast, and I think that you can just expect to get a little bit more bold. These are going to be some, especially after trying some of that Knob Creek that we tried last time we saw each other, and the last time you drank an American whiskey or American rye. These are a little bit more of those hallmark flavors, that spiciness.
This is like a cinnamon bomb right on the front of the tongue.
Yeah.
This is
not to detour, but how have you guys done it with Knob Creek? I mean, every single iteration of it that I try, I'm like, oh my God, they did it again. You know?
No,
and Knob Creek's a standby that I have. I actually buy it in the big, I guess it's the 175 bottle, because I have a little stand that does this. You kind
of need one of those when you have.
I have one of those.
Yeah, you need one.
Well, this is great. Tell me again what this is.
So this is going to be an 8-year-old Kentucky straight rye whiskey. So this will be a lot more in line with what our Knob Creek is going to be, and this will be more of the base of the whiskey that we're going to blend together to make this chapter 2. So when Freddie was putting together those first 2 whiskeys, he was looking for the mouthfeel and finish with that 40-year-old Canadian, and then trying to get that fruit that we all noticed so obviously with that 13-year-old Canadian there. Yep. And so really kind of given the base, the soul of the whiskey is going to come back to being an American-based product, and of course with our 8-year-old awesome Kentucky straight rye coming out of the barrel at 119.8 proof.
Yeah, and this, you taste the proof on this one more than the other ones.
More than the first two, yeah.
Like the heat comes back right there, and it's not an unpleasant thing, but it's definitely more there on this one.
I will tell you that based on the components separately, I'm thinking this is going to be even better than the last. Based on the components separately, because separately I've liked each one of these better than its counterpart in the first.
All right.
Not that I didn't like the first, but in the first I particularly enjoyed the final product much more than I enjoyed any of the individuals. And in this case, I've liked each of these individuals.
Well, you remember when we tried that first one too? That was when we were at Bozcat. Yes. And Krockenberger walked in, and he always has this kind of Godfather-like presence that he projects. Have you noticed that about him?
No.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Every time, when I'm around Krockenberger, all I can think is every time I think I'm out, they keep pulling me back in.
I guess he does have that look. You did a really good Frank look right there. That was good.
Can we show that look to the camera just in case there's any friends
because the camera's facing. Let's see if I can do it backwards.
Okay. That's good. That's good. That's very good.
See, now that you mentioned it,
the advantages of being on video. All right, so what we have here is the finished product.
So this is the finished product. This will be the blend of all 3 of the whiskeys we tried. This will be Little Book Chapter 2, No Simple Task. This comes out at 121.1 proof, so a little bit more, just about the same actually, at 120.88 is the first release. What I will say that's interesting when you're talking about sophomore efforts and albums and things, with Little Book Chapter 1, he tried multiple, upwards of 20 plus experiments and blends of putting together what he did. He chose the second one he ever put together. The second one he chose was the one he stuck with. He just kept trying to beat his second. This one is actually the 29th out of the 32nd that he did.
29 out of 32.
29 out of he chose his 29th blend out of the 32 he's working with.
It's really good, isn't it? Like,
I think
it's smooth.
My favorite profile. Hold on, let me try it back to back here. Man, I don't know. They're both good, but I might like the Chapter 2 better.
I think I do.
Because I like the malty. Like, it's bigger malt.
Yeah.
It's bigger malt. It's bigger up front.
You don't have to dig hard to find that fruit, though, too, which is really
nice.
It's
right there under the surface.
It's
in the
there.
middle of the flavor profile. And then it finishes with this great oakiness.
Yes, that's what I'm loving. I'm just sitting here enjoying that finish.
And I would almost say it's dry, but it's not really that dry. It's very oaky and a little astringent, but it's not really that dry.
Yeah,
it's quite
my
good.
mouth's kind of watering still.
Yeah.
So, in a good way.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I'll tell you, that's wonderful.
So, just to save you the trouble, you can leave that with me.
Yes.
I got other gifts.
I love that.
So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We will be back with Founder's Curmudgeon's Better Half. It's an old ale brewed with molasses and aged in maple syrup bourbon barrels. I want to come back.
My kind of beer.
I want to come back to this and talk about it a little more. But if we don't get to that soon, we may not be in any shape to actually judge it fairly. So we have that coming up. Plus, I have talked to you
a beer
about the new beer for dogs. We'll get to that story coming up. It's Smoking and Toast, and it's show number 111.
I'm glad y'all like that. I think it's pretty good.
That's spectacular.
It's amazing. I mean, he's 31 years old. And he's pulling this off.
Kids these days.
Yeah.
You kids and your loud rock and roll music. Okay, so funny note. Just to kind of cleanse my palate,
Absolutely.
I went back and took a big swig of this Love Street.
Yeah, I saw you do that.
It makes Love Street taste like water and barley, and that's it. Like, it takes everything else out of
Adam,
the Love
would you like
Street.
to try the fruitier whiskey too, the one that we were talking about kind of effusively about?
That's the 40-year-old Canadian. Right?
The 13-year-old's the fruity one.
The 13 was the fruity. 40-year-old was the malty one.
I've never heard of a 40-year-old whiskey.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Pretty neat to be able to play around with it.
There's the fruity one, and the first one, Adam, is the finished product.
Okay.
I just imagine them walking through the warehouse. Yeah, we got this 40-year-old barrel over here, eh?
Yep. When I was up, so not in Walkerville, but up in Alberta, where one of our other Canadian, where our true Canadian distillery
You know
is.
that makes me sing Gordon Lightfoot songs, right?
Yes.
Or Anne Murray songs, or Rush songs.
Alberta bound.
Yeah.
But being able to try it right out of the barrel, it's same situation.
That's
See,
pretty
when
amazing.
Unfortunately, when I think Canada, I think Terrence and Phillip.
Shut your fucking ass.
That's like the greatest song ever
It is a
recorded.
great song.
Oh, so good.
You're a bone-biting bastard.
So good. It's just like, it's one of the first times I've ever heard, that sort of language combined with
So
that
liberally
sort
used.
of orchestration and then the marching band comes in on the final chorus. Oh my God, that's just...
It's a great movie all around.
it really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's on. They show it on
I'm
cable
gonna-
every once in a while, and I'll watch it when I catch it.
Now, how
I'm
are
going
you...
to run to the restroom.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Now, how are you on the one that those guys did with the puppets? The
Avenue Q.
no, not Avenue Q. It's the one. It's the one with Kim Jong Il. That he
Adventure
banned.
American Team. American Adventure Team or something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
I haven't watched the whole thing all the way, to be honest.
Yeah, I've only seen about 3/4 of
Yeah.
it, but I found it funny. But for me,
Not as
nothing
funny
beats
as South Park.
Terrence and Phillip. I would literally, if Terrence and Phillip were a weekly series, I would watch every episode.
I actually did watch. Hulu's got the new season of South Park on, and I've caught up with most of it. We stay up late, right, and have random bouts of insomnia. Yep.
Yes.
So I just started watching the first 2 episodes of the recent season. Still funny.
It's funny how they've
Still
not lost
funny.
their edge,
Yeah,
isn't
never,
it? Yeah.
ever.
It's like
amazing.
you think they would run out of targets
20+
to go
years of
after,
doing
but
that.
yeah. I still have somewhere a VHS video of the original Oh,
wow.
The one that started all the Jesus versus Santa Claus Christmas thing. Yeah. Brilliant.
That's amazing.
Just brilliant.
When I was in college, this was me starting college in 1994, and for a little bit there, I worked for my last home stretch of college. I worked in the pizza shop, and for a little bit I did delivering, and I remember around like 1996, 97, probably knocking on doors and people would be in there and they'd be doing these South Park watch parties, and I'd say, what is that? And it was South Park. And I was like, here's your pizza. I got to watch that show. Various levels of fog, and depending on which room, which house I knocked on the door of.
Yeah, it's interesting how part of that show's appeal is the crudeness of the animation. Like, it's the fact that they don't like make it look better. Is part of why.
But it's still kind of light years beyond what it was when it started.
Oh yeah, totally is. Well, originally it was just construction paper stuff being moved around on a board, you know. But still,
great show,
quite good. Yes.
Hilarious,
quite good.
Are y'all talking about me again?
Yes,
I just heard quite good and
awesome, hilarious,
and hilarious. Yes. All right, final segment.
Handsome, hilarious.
Final segment.
Well, that part was about me.
Man, this is so good.
I'm glad y'all like it.
All right, kids, we're ready to rock. Final segment.
On the beach in Hawaii.
Welcome back. It is Smoking and Toasting, and we are thrilled that you have decided to hang out with us for show number 111. Our guest is Adam Harris from Beam Suntory. Adam is responsible for basically being the public face, I guess, of the American whiskey division of the company. But Beam Suntory is how many spirits total? Do you have a number?
Oh, off the top of my head, no, I could not tell you off the top of my head. Quite a few.
If you were to guess.
Quite a few. I mean, we make...
It's hundreds, right?
We've got over 100. I would definitely be confident saying that.
Yeah. And have you, like, is there any, like, requirement for working, like, do you have to try everything that the company makes? Is that part of, like how do they handle that? Obviously, you need to be familiar with the product, certainly with what you're working on, but, like, do they...
Yeah, no,
they make you try the other stuff too. Did they make?
They don't make us do it. We do it willfully and gladly. But I do try everything we do, and I've had the chance to be on some of the early sessions of actually tasting products as we develop them, and that's been pretty great.
How long have you been with them?
Over 12 years.
Wow.
Actually. Yeah,
wow, great.
But always in bourbon. I've never deviated. I've never worked in other departments. I've always been kind of on the forefront of what we're doing on the American whiskey and bourbon situation.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So you've seen a lot of the newer developments.
I have.
Going along. That's cool.
I feel like my career has sort of spanned the Renaissance, more or less, because in my beginning, it was still
in the beginning.
In the beginning,
there was Adam,
and in the beginning there too.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, but I feel like it's I've gotten to see sort of the people come to Jesus on bourbon and sort of take it in as that spirit that they love and that they go to. I mean, I remember before going to whiskey fests back in my early days was very monochromatic. You know, there was like one sort of group of folks that were showing up. You know, and I think we've gotten it's just. Everybody's interested in bourbon now, and I'd rather it be like that than just having it be so specialized and only appreciated by a certain segment of folks and of society. That I just love the fact that everybody's into it, and it just makes it easier for me to talk because more people want to hear it.
Nice. You know? I think it started really with food. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and there was like the Galloping Gourmet, and a couple of shows like that on TV. But when the TV Food Network came out, during the cable explosion, more and more people started to become foodies and started to really become interested in the combination of things to create certain flavors and certain dishes. And I think that
people
spilled its way over into the beverage industry, both beer and spirits. And
people stepped out of that whole everything's, the 50s Betty Crocker thing,
Right.
Like, because...
where you just make mashed potatoes and a piece of meat.
Right. Well, for a long time... taste was homogenized. Like it was a cool thing that you could get the same thing no matter where you were.
Right, and that the whole thing that not knocking McDonald's, but that was the key to
staple
McDonald's success was that a Big Mac tastes the same no matter what city you order it in.
Right,
and
there's a little comfort in that. But truthfully, when I want to go outside, I want to go try different things.
Yeah,
I know
and I get what you're saying. That Food Network exploded. It was crazy.
Yeah, I know the first thing that I am interested in when I get to a town that is not my town is I want to try local beers and local spirits if there are any, if I can find them, and some kind of local restaurant that's not, there's no point in going to another city and eating at a restaurant that exists in my city. I want to eat somewhere where I can't get that at home.
I actually think that's a huge thing for me because I feel like I do the same thing. When I go to a town, I feel like in the U.S., the only thing that separates city to city to city before the big, smaller distillery boom happened or is still happening, when you go over to Europe, it's like try the wine from place to place to place, region to region to region. As you go from coast to coast in the U.S., it's sort of try the beer. Try the beer coast to coast to coast. And I always sort of do that. I was just in Cleveland, counted 30 breweries, little breweries, walking around the city,
Yeah, that's awesome.
And huge. And just try the beer, but also like, what's your signature sandwich? What's the city's signature sandwich?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's a big thing me and my wife do when we go to places. I will tell you this funny story though. I went to San Francisco years ago, and everyone kept telling me. My brother was like, "You got to go to Fisherman's Wharf." Everyone kept saying, "Go to Fisherman's Wharf." I went down there, and the first thing I saw was a Joe's Crab Shack. I mean,
not gonna
just goes to show you. Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Ian, a place that you and I enjoy meeting occasionally for a whiskey is a little bar downtown Houston called Reserve 101.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that place is awesome.
Great place. The owners of Reserve 101, Megan and Steve Long, have started a new venture. It's called Good Boy Dog Beer.
I didn't know that was them. I see it at the New Potato where I go hang out from time to time.
So it was okay if I drank it, right?
Well, I was going to say, I'm about to tell you the three questions they get asked the most. The first is it really for dogs? Answer's yes. Is it alcoholic? Answer's no. Can I drink it? The third question, and the answer is sure. But it doesn't exactly apparently dance on the human palate. It doesn't have any complete lack of sodium, and we generally, as a species, don't find things flavorful if they have zero salt in them. It just isn't it doesn't dance on our tongue is a perfect way to say it. But that was never the intention. They also own Henderson Heights Bar in the 6th Ward and Reserve 101 downtown. And they wanted to create a new product that mixed two of their favorite things on the planet, beer and dogs. And so they're not pretending to be the first people with the idea, but they have got this available. And
well, that's awesome because I'm glad they didn't do dog flavored beer.
So there's the whole
which would be the other option, right?
Well, we talked about bacon flavored beer. There might be hot dog flavored beer,
right? I think that's a
Scotch and hot dog water. That's my favorite drink ever.
I think that's a Limp Bizkit album title, isn't it? Whoa! Out of nowhere, Limp Bizkit gets name checked on the show.
What just happened?
What just happened? Very quick. Okay, you're now an honorary member of the show.
Am I in now?
You're totally an honorary member of the show. No, the whole reason that I brought you this story about the beer for dogs is so I could read you the names of the beers. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
These are the different beers they
Lay
have
it on
for
me,
dogs.
bro.
All right. Here we go. There's Mailman Malt Liquor.
Of course.
Session Squirrel.
Squirrel?
And my personal favorite, IPA Lot in the Yard. See, you have to appreciate that kind of dedication.
How can that not be your favorite? That's great.
How can that not be awesome?
I actually saw those. Like I said, I saw those at the New Potato where I go have a cigar at least once a week, and I was laughing about it. I thought we got to have these guys on the show, and I kept forgetting to mention, and I'm glad you brought that up.
IPA Lot in the Yard. I just have to say that again. That's awesome.
What do you got in your hand there?
Or in the case of my dog, in the rock garden outside of my building.
Right.
So here we go. Ready?
Oh, that sounded good.
This would be from Founders Brewing Company. It is now. I don't know if you remember the label for Old Curmudgeon, but I'm going to show this one to the camera. This is Old Curmudgeon's better half, and here's what it says on the label: Old ale brewed with molasses and aged in maple syrup bourbon barrels.
I'm for it.
Wow.
Yeah, and let me just see if I can read this. It's a very condensed print, and I don't see that well. What tames an old ale like Curmudgeon? The tender embrace of oak and sweet maple. Ian's like, he could have poured before he started reading this. That's what. The result is Curmudgeon's better half, a harmonious matrimony of our receptively smooth old ale, brewed with molasses and then time spent aging in bourbon barrels that have previously held maple syrup, because all counterparts should be sweet, rich, and utterly delicious.
You know, that sounds suspiciously like something I would bring.
Yeah, it really does. And if it has chunks in it, I'm gonna have to tip my hat to you, Ian. Let me pass that over. Now, I will say on pouring it, and I have not tried this, it is not as thick or dark looking as I was necesserly expecting.
Pretty
but then
straightforward ale color, right?
Yeah, it almost looks like a Scotch ale, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of color.
Well, the Old Curmudgeon is not that dark a beer either, but I will tell you, you said it doesn't look that thick. Give it a little swirl. It's actually got a little bit of a...
Yeah, you may be right. There may be some hidden viscosity there.
Yeah, it's not watery.
Hidden
Touch
viscosity.
cloudy.
Starring Tom Cruise as Jack Ryan. Sorry.
Just finished that series. Y'all watch that Amazon series?
Oh, that Amazon series was awesome.
It was really good, yeah.
Largely because it didn't star Tom Cruise as Jack Ryan.
I just saw Tropic Thunder the other night again.
That's funny.
And that whole intro where they have all the different movie trailers is just hilarious.
Yeah, it's really good. But yes, the Jack Ryan series on Amazon, highly recommended. If you like action movies of any kind,
it's good.
Or like if you're a fan of like the early seasons of 24, that type of thing.
I enjoyed the fact that they put a bow at the end of it. I mean, who's to say what might happen in the future? But it's nice to have like.
But it wasn't completely open ended. Yes,
I have a surprise for you. I actually
Spoiler
watched
alert.
some TV.
Did you really? What'd you watch?
I never watch TV. It's kind of funny.
I heard this about you. Actually,
Hip Hop Evolution.
Oh, and
The second season is out, and
I've heard
it's
that's good.
Great.
Yeah, I've heard that's good.
So good.
And you were such a hip hopper too, so I totally.
I love me some old school hip hop.
Yeah,
I do.
I know.
My stay up at this kind of kicked in last night. I ended up watching a bit of. I recorded them to watch them later, but I ended up watching a little bit of the first episode or the first part of The Searcher, the Elvis Presley documentary.
I've seen
that.
I haven't
watched
seen
a little bit of the
but
second part too. Yeah,
I've seen the. I've got it on my queue.
I'm looking forward to diving in and
I'll
seeing
have
the
to
whole
check
thing.
that out.
Yeah,
I will
looked
just
really
say,
great.
by the way, for rock and roll and old school hip hop, probably no better documentary I've watched than the one that Apple did on Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine.
Yes,
And the name is escaping
it's like
me
the
at the
Innovators
moment.
or something.
The
like
Innovators,
that,
or Regulators, or whatever it was. It's not Regulators, but
9 whiskeys, 3 beers.
So, guys, we have talked about everything but the taste of this beer, and I know you've sampled, Ian. So let's start with you.
Well, so first off, you'll notice after your very first taste, this is not thin.
No,
it actually has a lot more mouthfeel than you think by the color of it.
Oh, yes.
The second thing is the maple is interesting because it doesn't just smack you with maple; it sneaks you into the maple towards the end.
I agree totally. It's almost like you ever eat a waffle and at first you taste the bread of the waffle. And then you taste the syrup.
Right.
It's kind of like that, you know?
So this also has a little bit of raisin or even maybe prune or date in the front of it that really comes through. And this, I think, is an outstanding beer. Again,
this is your kind of beer, Ian.
Well, yeah, I mean, I drank quite a few of these a couple weeks ago. But it is also, I think, in the 10% neighborhood if you want to look at the bottle. It's boozy, and it doesn't even taste boozy. It just tastes big and sweet and delicious, if you ask me.
It's got a big, beefy aroma.
Yeah, and it stands up to the whiskey that we were drinking earlier.
I will tell you that the the bottle is worth 10 cents in Oregon.
Because the maltiness of this is so ridiculous. Yeah, the molasses is there on the very tail end of the flavor. Like, you get the body of it, but you really taste it on the flavor. The tail end aftertaste is what I'm looking for. Sorry.
Oh, what were you guessing the alcohol content was?
10-ish.
12.7, my friend.
There's a reason I love this beer.
That may be one of the higher alcohol content beers we've had on the show. What do you think's been the biggest that we've had?
I brought a bottle of the Dogfish Head, the big IPA they make. I'm blanking on it. The 90 minute, the 120 minute, which was I think in the neighborhood of 18 or 19%, and it was amazing.
That is good. It's sipping only. Like you can't quaff.
You
that.
can't. Like I'm done with mine.
That sounded distinctly like a challenge.
So
it really did.
So I'm experienced with this beer. I've had this before, and it's a fantastic beer, and it goes down so easy and so quick.
This is a limited release, right? This is not something.
It's hard to tell with Founders because sometimes they put out stuff like this, and then 2 years later you still see it on a shelf. Sometimes they do it, and it's there for a season. I don't know. I haven't looked it up.
I do know that the All Day IPA was supposed to be a limited release, and it became like one of their like staples of the company now. So
I would love to get them on our show, and first off, listen to them talk because I've got a lot of family from Michigan.
Well, they're
talk
from
like
Grand
my family.
Rapids,
And I tease them about it too. They tease me about it.
I feel like that beer definitely has a place at the dinner table.
Yeah,
like
this
a food pairing beer.
Yeah.
But so now I also can agree that this is a big enough beer to where one bottle shared between two or three is a great, after dinner, sitting down, chilling out. It goes great with cigars. I've had that with, I think when I popped open one of those, I think I did a LFD double Ajero, and it stood.
Well, it would stand up to it. I
what
think,
else are you going to do to stand up to a double Ajero?
Yeah.
And which is a huge cigar, by the way. If you like mild cigars, do not get one of those.
Yep.
Right.
Noted.
Because that's like a hammer to the forehead if you're used to the mild. But it stood up great to that, and the chocolatey notes. This doesn't have a lot of chocolatey notes, but the chocolatey notes in that Super Ligero, or the double Ligero, really complemented this, so they actually work together pretty well.
That's a serious cigar.
Yeah,
I want to drink that with like a roast duck or something like that. It sounds so
right.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
it has that
absolutely.
vibe to it, doesn't it?
And stuff that's very savory, like this whole season, like where you have the savory roast turkey and stuff like that. It's going to go great.
Have some of
with
that at
those
Thanksgiving.
ready to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Good sharing beer too.
Well, I will tell you, I think it's terrific, and if I were to pair it up, I'd probably pair it with like a Nat Sherman, Connecticut, probably. I just did that to psych out Chris Hart. I agree. It needs a La Flor Dominicana chisel.
It needs to be
or
big.
Something,
Yeah, it needs to be
stand
big.
up to it. Maybe something in the not medium to full, but full category would be my recommendation. Well, I like it. I like it very much. Now let me ask you about Little Book again. This is the second. Can we find the first one still, or is it essentially gone?
It's one of our smallest releases. So the first chapter is probably mostly out of stores by now.
Okay.
And now we're starting to see the second release kind of trickle into Houston.
And when you say trickle in, is it that way by design?
It is the smallest thing we do. It's not, when we get it in, it's not going to we don't release it slowly. It's not a slow drip. We kind of put it in there, but it's a matter of how it gets from us to the store.
From point A to point B.
Yeah, point A to point E.
And is it allocated, or is it, how does it work?
It's limited, not allocated. But we don't have that very much of it. It's actually smaller than the quarterly releases of Bookers that we do.
So what you're basically saying is that people are listening to the show, they like what we've described, they think it sounds like something they want. This needs to be on your priority list to get in the next few months.
Within the month's time, between now and Thanksgiving, I would look for this whiskey.
All right, that makes sense. So it's I think it's spectacular. It's one of
I'm glad you like it.
I enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed anything we've tried here in a while. This is really spectacular.
Thank you.
When I had that lunch with you guys over at the Boss Cat, I mean, we had some great whiskeys that day.
We did.
So
Some of
to
my
be
favorites.
able to stand up to some of that stuff, I mean, very impressive.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Very impressive. So look for this, and it is, the official name is just Little Book, or does it say
Little Book Chapter 2?
It does say
but
Chapter 2.
You'll see
in
it
the
as Little
packaging.
Book, and then on the packaging it will say Chapter 2, and it's No Simple Task.
No simple
Yeah.
task. I like it.
Because you got to title your chapters.
Yes, you
There
do.
you go, of course.
Every chapter needs a title.
I'm going through all the
I do
Harry
like it
Potters
when
with my son
authors
right now.
do that.
Yeah. I wish your first iteration had been called It Was a Dark and Stormy Night. That would have been awesome.
In the beginning.
Yes, that would have been awesome. Well, Adam, thank you very much for coming on the
been
show
a lot of fun.
and sharing this stuff with us. The deconstructions were just fascinating.
That's so fantastic.
And
to
the
be
two
able to
were
do that.
so different from each other, which made it all
Well,
that
not only
much
that,
more
but the
interesting.
components. Like you'd think, okay, well, you'd share some components, but there's nothing shared between these. These are like vastly different areas you're coming from.
If you drank just the two little books side by side, you wouldn't say, "Oh, these are vastly different." You'd say they're a bit different, right?
Should we do that?
Sure, let's do that. That'll be our final thing that we do is just to drink them side by side and say, okay, because as you pointed out, Ian, the components are just complete, like
they're so
night and
different.
day. But in my memory, at least, number 1 and number 2 aren't radically different. They are a bit different.
I think I think there might be a bit of a different opinion after trying them
All right,
fresh.
this will
next
be
to each other.
interesting to see.
But that's the thing, too.
Actually, I don't think that at all. I was just trying to get him to pour more so we could.
I was going to
Mission
say,
accomplished.
actually, I kind of did this earlier and
Well
noted
done.
that they were quite different from each other.
Yeah,
But I'm going to let you go through.
thanks
with
for
this.
not speaking up. I appreciate that.
Well, it means more whiskey for us.
That's what I'm talking about.
But when you think
all
about
right,
where
this is
the future
first.
could be, the
This is
future could be
first.
with rum. Maybe there might be some rum that kind of gets into the equation. Maybe some tequila comes into the equation.
Interesting.
You never know.
I'm
You
such
never
a
know.
fan of those spirits. I can't even tell you.
Thank
All
you,
right,
sir.
so this is the first. See,
So handing you chapter 2 now.
and this, of course, I've had. And
So it's interesting too because the color
Huge
difference.
color
Chapter
difference,
1
right?
is redder,
Yep.
a little darker.
chapter 2 is the lighter color. Yes.
Chapter 2 is a little bit lighter in color overall.
All right. So I've definitely got number 1 on my palate. Number 1 more mapley than number 2, at least.
Also, you just had that big maple bomb on the.
Yes, on the beer.
Curmudgeon's better
Yes,
half,
that's
yeah.
right.
There, yeah. Where's the lime and the salt? Are we doing this wrong?
If you
Sorry. You know the running joke is no limes and no salt were hurt in this episode.
Yes.
keep it in. Don't
Got
spit it out.
Yep, that's great.
Okay, so you're right, of course, and they are vastly different.
Worlds
It's-
apart.
It's a much bigger difference than I was remembering. But that's the funny thing about the palate. Like, when you're apart from something, like when you haven't had something or when you've tried several other things.
The palate is
since
very,
then,
what have you done for me lately? You
You're
know?
so right about
Yeah.
that. But trying them side by side, I will say number 1, definitely more bold, more mapley. Chapter 2, more subtle and reminds me more of like the single malt type experience where it's just more like subtle on the
So
palate.
number 1 comes in and introduces the character like it's kicking down the door. It's like
Right,
it's right
right.
here in the front of the palate, and then you get this wave. Then it goes into this nice aftertaste. And number 2 does almost the opposite. That like the
Chapter 2 is
initial
where we find out they're a real person and we should care about them for these
right.
reasons
The initial
if
kind of
we're gonna
sneaks
keep
you
reading
in
the book, right?
And
the
then
second date.
in
Yeah,
the
it's
middle
second
of the
date.
palate, you get a lot of the character, and then the aftertaste is big and full, and you get to enjoy it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you think about what was some of the reasoning behind making number 1 and what he was thinking about, what he wanted to do, and kind of that homage to bourbon.
It's a little more
there's
traditional.
a very familiar flavor in chapter 1, and
Yes.
I like that about it.
Yes, very
And then
much
chapter
so.
2 has definitely gone off that reservation.
Absolutely.
180 degrees away.
This is a completely
Yeah.
different. Let's try something over here.
Yeah.
Sort of a vibe to it. Well, they are both delicious, and I will be scanning my store shelves to make sure I don't miss out on being able to grab a bottle of this because it's certainly at about an $80 price point. You said this is something that should be in your.
I
bar.
would deem this totally worth it. This is a special occasion. Unless you have a whole lot more money than me, that's fine too. But this is a special occasion, must have. I'd say.
Yeah, I was going to say it's worthy of the spending and putting in your bar because this is one you can break out when good friends come over.
Awesome.
And that's a good way to put it. So I I think we will leave you with that. We have really appreciated having Adam.
My pleasure.
Beam
Thank you for
Suntory
having me
on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and we've enjoyed the whiskey very, very much. On next week's show, Nicholas Tomontes from Four Roses will be joining us.
That's going to be a blast.
And I'm looking forward. Nicholas, I got to spend a little time with him at the Whiskey Sniff. Very cool dude, and of course we're fans of Four Roses, so we're looking forward to that. Plus, there's a barley shortage on the horizon.
Ooh.
And this could impact craft beer prices, could double craft beer prices, is what the guys are saying.
Wow. So don't do that to me.
Yeah, I'll give you that story coming up. Plus, for the third year, Whiskey Bible has picked an American whiskey as best. We'll tell you what that is on next week's show. So
awesome.
Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to use the Chapter 2 to toast you guys and say thank you for watching and listening to Smoking and Toasting.
Cheers, and thank you, Adam.
And cheers,
guys. Thank you.
And thanks to Adam on the Wheels of Steel. Woo.